Mahabharata, Book 3, Section 281. Markandeya said, "It was on the breast of that very hill where Rama was seated with those foremost of monkeys that great monkey chiefs, at the command of Sugriva, began to flock together. The father-in-law of Vali, the illustrious Sashina, accompanied by 1,000 crores of active apes, came to Rama. And those two foremost of monkeys, endued with mighty energy, viz., Gaya and Gavakshya, each accompanied by 100 crores of monkeys, showed themselves there. And, O king, Gavakshya, also of terrible mien and endued with a bovine tail, showed himself there, having collected 60,000 crores of monkeys. And the renowned Gandhamadana, dwelling on the mountains of the same name, collected 100,000 crores of monkeys. And the intelligent and mighty monkey known by the name of Panasa mustered together 52 crores of monkeys. And that foremost and illustrious of monkeys, named Dadamukha of mighty energy, mustered a large army of monkeys possessed of terrible prowess. And Jamvuvan showed himself there with 100,000 crores of black bears of terrible deeds and faces having the Thilaka mark. And these and many other chiefs of monkey chiefs, countless in number, O king, came there for aiding Rama's cause. And endued with bodies huge as mountain peaks and roaring like lions, loud was the uproar that was heard there made by those monkeys running restlessly from place to place. And some of them looked like mountain peaks, and some looked like buffaloes. And some were of the hue of autumnal clouds, and the faces of some were red as vermilion. And some rose high, and some fell down, and some cut capers, and some scattered the dust, as they mustered together from various directions. And that monkey army, vast as the sea at full tide, encamped there at Sugriva's bidding. And after those foremost of monkeys had mustered from every direction, the illustrious descendant of Raghu, with Sugriva by his side, set out in an auspicious moment of a very fair day under a lucky constellation, accompanied by that host arrayed in order of battle, as if for the purpose of destroying all the worlds. And Hanuman, the son of the wind god, was in the van of that host, while the rear was protected by the fearless son of Sumitra. And surrounded by the monkey chiefs, those princes of Raghu's house, with fingers cased in guana skin, shone, as they went, like the sun and the moon in the midst of the planets. And that monkey host, armed with stones and sala and tala trees, looked very much like a far-extending field of corn under the morning sun. And that mighty army, protected by Nala and Nila and Ingadha and Kratha and Minda and Dvivida, marched forth for achieving the purpose of Raghava. And encamping successively, without interruption of any kind, on wide and healthy tracts and valleys abounding with fruits and roots and water and honey and meat, the monkey host at last reached the shores of the briny sea. And like unto a second ocean, that mighty army with its countless colors, having reached the shores of sea, took up its abode there. Then the illustrious son of Dasaratha, addressing Sugriva amongst all those foremost monkeys, spoke unto him these words that were suited to the occasion: "This army is large. The ocean also is difficult to cross. What contrivance, therefore, commends itself to thee for crossing the ocean?" At these words, many vainglorious monkeys answered, "We are fully able to cross the sea." This answer, however, was not of much use, as all could not avail of that means. Some of the monkeys proposed to cross the sea in boats, and some in rafts of various kinds. Rama, however, conciliating them all, said, "This cannot be. The sea here is a full 100 yojanas in width. All the monkeys, ye heroes, will not be able to cross it. This proposal, therefore, that ye have made, is not consonant to reason. Besides, we have not the number of boats necessary for carrying all our troops. How, again, can one like us raise such obstacles in the way of the merchants? Our army is very large. The foe will make a great havoc if a hole is detected. Therefore, to cross the sea in boats and rafts doth not recommend itself to me. I will, however, pray to the ocean for the necessary means. Foregoing food, I will lie down on the shore. He will certainly show himself to me. If, however, he doth not show himself, I will chastise him then by means of my great weapons that are more blazing than fire itself and are incapable of being baffled." Having said these words, both Rama and Lakshmana touched water and duly laid themselves down on a bed of kusa grass on the seashore. The divine and illustrious ocean, then, that lord of male and female rivers, surrounded by aquatic animals, appeared unto Rama in a vision. And addressing Rama in sweet accents, the genius of the ocean, surrounded by countless mines of gems, said, O son of Kausalya, tell me what aid, O bull among men, I am to render thee. I also have sprung from the race of Ikshwaku and am, therefore, a relative of thine. Rama replied unto him, saying, O Lord of rivers, male and female, I desire thee to grant me a way for my troops, passing along which I may slay the 10-headed, Ravana, that wretch of Pulasatya's race. If thou dost not grant the way I beg of thee, I will then dry thee up by means of my celestial arrows inspired with mantras. And hearing these words of Rama, the genius of Varana's abode, joining his hands, answered in great affliction, I do not desire to put any obstacle in thy way. I am no foe of thine. Listen, O Rama, to these words, and having listened, do what is proper. If, at thy command, I get a way for the passage of thy army, others then, from strength of their bows, will command me to do the same. In thy army there is a monkey of the name of Nala, who is a skillful mechanic. And endued with great strength, Nala is the son of Tastri, the divine artificer of the universe. And whether it is wood, or grass, or stone, that he will throw into my waters, I will support the same on my surface, and thus wilt thou have a bridge, over which to pass. And having said these words, the genius of the ocean disappeared. And Rama awaking, called Nala unto him and said, Build thou a bridge over the sea. Thou alone, I am sure, art able to do it. And it was by this means that the descendant of Kakutsha's race caused a bridge to be built that was 10 yojanas in width and 100 yojanas in length. And to this day that bridge is celebrated over all the world by the name of Nala's Bridge. And having completed that bridge, Nala, of body huge as a hill, came away at the command of Rama. And while Rama was on this side of the ocean, the virtuous Vibhishana, the brother of the king of the Rakshasas, accompanied by 4 of his counselors, came unto Rama. And the high-souled Rama received him with due welcome. Sugriva, however, feared, thinking he might be a spy. The son of Raghu, meanwhile perfectly satisfied with Vibhishana, in consequence of the sincerity of his exertions and the many indications of his good conduct, worshipped him with respect. And he also installed Vibhishana in the sovereignty of all the Rakshasas and made him his own junior counselor and a friend of Lakshmana's. And it was under Vibhishana's guidance, O king, that Rama with all his troops crossed the great ocean by means of that bridge in course of a month. And having crossed the ocean and arrived at Lanka, Rama caused its extensive and numerous gardens to be devastated by his monkeys. And while Rama's troops were there, 2 of Ravana's counselors and officers, named Sukha and Sarana, who had come as spies, having assumed the shape of monkeys, were seized by Vibhishana. And when those wanderers of the night assumed their real Rakshasa forms, Rama showed them his troop and dismissed them quietly. And having quartered his troops in those woods that skirted the city, Rama then sent the monkey Angatha with great wisdom as his envoy to Ravana. Footnotes 552:1 There is a difference of reading here. Some texts read 57. 552:2 A difference of reading is observable here. 553:1 As a purificatory ceremony, called the Akamana. To this day, no Hindu can perform any ceremony without going through the Akamana in the first instance. 554:1 Traditions represents the sons of King Sagara of the Ikshwaku race as the excavator of the ocean. Hence the ocean is called Sagara. Mahabharata, Book 3, Section 282. Markandeya said, having quartered his army in those groves abounding with food and water and with fruits and roots, the descendant of Kakutsha began to watch over them with care. Ravana, on the other hand, planted in his city many appliances constructed according to the rules of military science. And his city, naturally impregnable on account of its strong ramparts and gateways, had 7 trenches that were deep and full of water to the brim and that abounded with fishes and sharks and alligators, made more impregnable still by means of pointed stakes of Kadira wood. And the ramparts, heaped with stones, were made impregnable by means of catapults. And the warriors, who guarded the walls, were armed with earthen pots filled with venomous snakes, and with resinous powders of many kinds. And they were also armed with clubs, and firebrands, and arrows, and lances, and swords, and battle-axes. And they had also satagnis and stout maces steeped in wax. And at all the gates of the city were planted movable and immovable encampments manned by large numbers of infantry supported by countless elephants and horses. And Ingatha, having reached one of the gates of the city, was made known to the Rakshasas. And he entered the town without suspicion or fear. And surrounded by countless Rakshasas, that hero in his beauty looked like the sun himself in the midst of masses of clouds. And having approached the hero of Pulasatya's race in the midst of his counselors, the eloquent Ingatha saluted the king and began to deliver Rama's message in these words, that descended of Raghu, O king, who ruleth at Kosala and whose renown hath spread over the whole world, saith unto thee these words suited to the occasion. Accept thou that message and act according to it. Provinces and towns, in consequence of their connection with sinful kings incapable of controlling their souls, are themselves polluted and destroyed. By the violent abduction of Sita, thou alone hast injured me. Thou, however, wilt become the cause of death to many unoffending persons. Possessed of power and filled with pride, thou hast, before this, slain many rishis living in the woods, and insulted the very gods. Thou hast slain also many great kings and many weeping women. For those transgressions of thine, retribution is about to overtake thee. I will slay thee with thy counselors. Fight and show thy courage. O wanderer of the night, behold the power of my bow, although I am but a man. Release Sita, the daughter of Janaka. If thou dost not release her, I shall make the earth divested of all Rakshasas with my keen-edged arrows. Hearing these defiant words of the enemy, King Ravana bore them ill, becoming senseless with wrath. And thereupon four Rakshasas skilled in reading every sign of their master, seized Ingatha like four hawks seizing a tiger. With those Rakshasas, however, holding him fast by his limbs, Ingatha leaped upwards and alighted on the palace terrace. And as he leaped up with a great force, those wanderers of the night fell down the earth, and bruised by the violence of the fall, had their ribs broken. And from the golden terrace on which he had alighted, he took a downward leap. And overleaping the walls of Lanka, he alighted to where his comrades were. And approaching the presence of the Lord of Kosala and informing him of everything, the monkey Ingatha, endued with great energy, retired to refresh himself, dismissed with due respect by Rama. The descendant of Raghu then caused the ramparts of Lanka to be broken down by a united attack of all those monkeys endued with the speed of the wind. Then Lakshmana, with Vibhishana and the king of the bears marching in the van, blew up the southern gate of the city that was almost impregnable. Rama then attacked Lanka with 100,000 crores of monkeys, all possessed of great skill in battle, and endued with reddish complexions like those of young camels. And those crores of grayish bears with long arms, and legs and huge paws, and generally supporting themselves on their broad haunches, were also urged on to support the attack. And in consequence of those monkeys leaping up and leaping down and leaping in transverse directions, the sun himself, his bright disk completely shaded, became invisible for the dust they raised. And the citizens of Lanka beheld the wall of their town assume all over a tawny hue, covered by monkeys of complexions yellow as the ears of paddy, and gray as sheerish flowers, and red as the rising sun, and white as flax or hemp. And the Rakshasas, O king, with their wives and elders, were struck with wonders at that sight. And the monkey warriors began to pull down pillars made of precious stones and the terraces and tops of palatial mansions. And breaking into fragments the propellers of catapults and other engines, they began to cast them about in all directions. And taking up the satagnis along with the discs, the clubs, and stones, they threw them down into the city with great force and loud noise. And attacked thus by the monkeys, those Rakshasas that had been placed on the walls to guard them, fled precipitately by hundreds and thousands. Then hundreds of thousands of Rakshasas, of terrible mien, and capable of assuming any form at will, came out at the command of the king. And pouring a perfect shower of arrows and driving the denizens of the forest, those warriors, displaying great prowess, adorned the ramparts. And soon those wanderers of the night, looking like masses of flesh, and of terrible mien, forced the monkeys to leave the walls. And mangled by the enemy's lances, numerous monkey chiefs fell down from the ramparts, and crushed by the falling columns and gateways, numerous Rakshasas also fell down to rise no more. And the monkeys and the brave Rakshasas that commenced to eat up the foe, struggled, seizing one another by the hair, and mangling and tearing one another with their nails and teeth. And the monkeys and the Rakshasas roared and yelled frightfully, and while many of both parties were slain and fell down to rise no more, neither side gave up the contest. And Rama continued all the while to shower a thick downpour of arrows like the very clouds. And the arrows he shot, enveloping Lanka, killed large numbers of Rakshasas. And the son of Sumitra, too, that mighty bowman incapable of being fatigued in battle, naming particular Rakshasas stationed on the ramparts, slew them with his clothyard shafts. And then the monkey host, having achieved success, was withdrawn at the command of Rama, after it had thus pulled down the fortifications of Lanka and made all objects within the city capable of being aimed at by the besieging force. Footnotes 555:1 lit. An engine killing 100. Perhaps, some kind of rude cannon. 555:2 Perhaps, brands or torches steeped in wax, intended to be thrown in a burning state amongst the foe. Readers of Indian history know how Lord Lake was repulsed from Baratpur by means of huge bales of cotton, steeped in oil, rolled from the ramparts of that town, in a burning state, towards the advancing English. 555:3 lit. Be a Purusha, male. Manhood would not be appropriate in connection with a Rakshasa. Mahabharata, Book 3, Section 283. Markandeya said, and while those troops, thus withdrawn, were reposing themselves in their quarters, many little Rakshasas and Pisachas owning Ravana as their leader, penetrated amongst them. And among these were Parvana, Patana, Jamba, Kara, Krodavesa, Hari, Peruja, Aruja, and Pragasa, and others. And as these wicked ones were penetrating, the monkey host, in their invisible forms, Vibhishana, who had the knowledge thereof, broke the spell of their invisibility. And once seen, O king, by the powerful and long-leaping monkeys, they were all slain and prostrated on the earth, deprived of life. And unable to endure this, Ravana marched out at the head of his troops. And surrounded by his terrible army of Rakshasas and Pisachas, Ravana, who was conversant with the rules of warfare like a second Usanas, invested the monkey host, having disposed his troops in that array which is named after Usanas himself. And beholding Ravana advancing with his army disposed in that array, Rama, following the mode recommended by Vrihaspati, disposed his troops in counter-array for opposing that wanderer of the night. And coming up quickly, Ravana began to fight with Rama. And Lakshmana singled out Indrajit, and Sugriva singled out Virapakshya, and Nikharvata fought with Tara, and Nala with Tunda, and Patusa with Panasa. And each warrior, advancing up to him whom he regarded as his match, began to fight with him on that field of battle, relying on the strength of his own arms, and that encounter, so frightful to timid persons, soon became terrible and fierce like that between the gods and the Asuras in the days of old. And Ravana covered Rama with a shower of darts and lances and swords, and Rama also afflicted Ravana with his whetted arrows of iron furnished with the sharpest points, and in the same way Lakshmana smote the contending Indrajit with arrows capable of penetrating into the most vital parts, and Indrajit also smote Sumitra's son with an arrowy shower. And Vibhishana showered upon Prahasta, and Prahasta showered upon Vibhishana, without any regard for each other, a thick downpour of winged arrows furnished with the sharpest points. And thus between those mighty warriors there came about an encounter of celestial weapons of great force, at which the three worlds with their mobile and immobile creatures were sorely distressed. Mahabharata, Book 3, Section 284. Markandeya said, then Prahasta, suddenly advancing up to Vibhishana and uttering a loud yell, struck him with his mace. But though struck with that mace of terrible force, the mighty armed Vibhishana of great wisdom, without wavering in the least, stood still as the mountains of Himavat. Then Vibhishana, taking up a huge and mighty javelin furnished with 100 bells, inspired it with mantras and hurled it at the head of his adversary. And by the impetuosity of that weapon rushing with the force of the thunderbolt, Prahasta's head was severed off, and he thereupon looked like a mighty tree broken by the wind. And beholding that wanderer of the night, Prahasta, thus slain in battle, Dhumraksha rushed with great impetuosity against the monkey host. And beholding the soldiers of Dhumraksha, looking like the clouds and endued with terrible mien, advancing up towards them, the monkey chief suddenly broke and fled. And seeing those foremost of monkeys suddenly give way, that tiger among monkeys, Hanuman, the son of Pavna, began to advance. And beholding the son of Pavna staying still on the field of battle, the retreating monkeys, O king, one and all quickly rallied. Then mighty and great and fearful was the uproar that arose there in consequence of the warriors of Rama and Ravana rushing against each other. And in that battle which raged terribly, the field soon became miry with blood. And Dhumraksha afflicted the monkey host with volleys of winged shafts. Then that vanquisher of foes, Hanuman, the son of Pavna, quickly seized that advancing leader of the Rakshasa. And the encounter that took place between that monkey and the Rakshasa hero, is desirous of defeating the other, was fierce and terrible, like that of Indra and Prahlada in days of yore. And the Rakshasa struck the monkey with his maces and spiked clubs, while the monkey struck the Rakshasa with trunks of trees unshorn of their branches. Then Hanuman, the son of Pavna, slew in great wrath that Rakshasa along with his charioteer and horses, and broke his chariot also into pieces. And beholding Dhumraksha, that foremost of Rakshasa, thus slain, the monkeys, abandoning all fear, rushed against the Rakshasa army with great valor. And slaughtered in large numbers by the victorious and powerful monkeys, the Rakshasas became dispirited and fled in fear to Lanka. And the surviving wreck of the Rakshasa army, having reached the city, informed King Ravana of everything that had happened. And hearing from them that Prahasta and that mighty archer Dhumraksha had both, with their armies, been slain by the powerful monkeys, Ravana drew a deep sigh and springing up from his excellent seat, said, "The time is come for Kumbhakarna to act." And having said this, he awake, by means of various loud-sounding instruments, his brother Kumbhakarna from his deep and prolonged slumbers. And having awaked him with great efforts, the Rakshasa king, still afflicted with anxiety, addressed the mighty Kumbhakarna and said unto him when seated at his ease on his bed, having perfectly recovered consciousness and self-possession, these words, "Thou, indeed, art happy, O Kumbhakarna, that canst enjoy profound and undisturbed repose, unconscious of the terrible calamity that hath overtaken us. Rama with his monkey host hath crossed the ocean by a bridge, and disregarding us all is waging a terrible war against us. I have stealthily brought away his wife Sita, the daughter of Janaka. And it is to recover her that he hath come hither, after having made a bridge over the great ocean. Our great kinsmen also, Prahasta and others, have already been slain by him. And, O scourge of thy enemies, there is not another person, save thee, that can slay Rama. Therefore, O warrior, putting on thy armor, do thou set out this day for the purpose of vanquishing Rama and his followers. The two younger brothers of Dashana, viz., Vajravega and Pramathan, will join thee with their forces." And having said this unto the mighty Kumbhakarna, the Rakshasa king gave instructions to Vajravega and Pramathan as to what they should do. And accepting his advice, those two warlike brothers of Dashana quickly marched out of the city, preceded by Kumbhakarna. Mahabharata, Book 3, Section 285. Markandeya said, Then Kumbhakarna set out from the city, accompanied by his followers. And soon he beheld the victorious monkey troops encamped before him. And passing them by with the object of seeking out Rama, he beheld the son of Sumitra standing at his post, bow in hand. Then the monkey warriors, speedily advancing towards him, surrounded him on all sides. And then they commenced to strike him with numberless large trees. And many amongst them fearlessly began to tear his body with their nails. And those monkeys began to fight with him in various ways approved by the laws of warfare. And they soon overwhelmed that chief of the Rakshasas with a shower of terrible weapons of various kinds. And attacked by them thus, Kumbhakarna only laughed at them and began to eat them up. And he devoured those foremost of monkeys known by the name of Chala, and Chandakala, and Vajravahu. And beholding that fearful act of the Rakshasa, other monkeys were frightened and set forth a loud wail of fear. And hearing the screams of those monkey leaders, Sugriva boldly advanced towards Kumbhakarna. And that high-souled king of the monkeys, swiftly approaching the Rakshasa, violently struck him on the head with the trunk of a sala tree. And though the high-souled Sugriva, always prompt in action, broke that sala tree on the head of Kumbhakarna, he failed to make any impression on that Rakshasa. And then, as if roused from his torpor by that blow, Kumbhakarna, stretching forth his arms, seized Sugriva by main force. And beholding Sugriva dragged away by the Rakshasa, the heroic son of Sumitra, that delighter of his friends, rushed towards Kumbhakarna. And that slayer of hostile heroes, Lakshmana, advancing towards Kumbhakarna, discharged at him an impetuous and mighty arrow furnished with golden wings. And that arrow, cutting through his coat of mail and penetrating into his body, passed through it outright and struck into the earth, stained with the Rakshas's blood. Kumbhakarna then, having his breast thus bored through, released the king of monkeys. And taking up a huge mass of stone as his weapon, the mighty warrior Kumbhakarna then rushed towards the son of Sumitra, aiming it at him. And as the Rakshasa rushed towards him, Lakshmana cut off his upraised arms by means of a couple of keen-edged shafts furnished with heads resembling razors. But as soon as the two arms of the Rakshasa were thus cut off, double that number of arms soon appeared on his person. Sumitra's son, however, displaying his skill and weapon, soon by means of similar arrows cut off those arms also, each of which had seized a mass of stone. At this, that Rakshasa assumed a form enormously huge and furnished with numerous heads and legs and arms. Then the son of Sumitra arrived, with a Brahma weapon, that warrior looking like an assemblage of hill. And rent by means of that celestial weapon, that Rakshasa fell on the field of battle like a huge tree with spreading branches suddenly consumed by heaven's thunderbolt. And beholding Kumbhakarna endued with great activity and resembling the Asura Vritra himself, deprived of life and prostrated on the field of battle, the Rakshasa warriors fled in fear. And beholding the Rakshasa warriors running away from the field of battle, the younger brother of Dashana, rallying them, rushed in great wrath upon the son of Sumitra. Sumitra's son, however, with a loud roar, received with his winged shafts both those wrathful warriors, Vajravega and Promathin, rushing towards him. The battle then, O son of Pritha, that took place between those two younger brothers of Dashana on the one hand and the intelligent Lakshmana on the other, was exceedingly furious and made the bristles of the spectators stand on end. And Lakshmana overwhelmed the two Rakshasas with a perfect shower of arrows. And those two Rakshasa heroes, on the other hand, both of them excited with fury, covered Lakshmana with an arrowy hail. And that terrible encounter between Vajravega and Promathin and the mighty-armed Lakshmana lasted for a short while. And Hanumana, the son of Pavna, taking up a mountain peak, rushed towards one of the brothers, and with that weapon took the life of the Rakshasa Vajravega. And that mighty monkey, Nala, also, with a large mass of rock, crushed Promathin, that other younger brother of Dashana. The deadly struggle, however, between the soldiers of Rama and Ravana, rushing against one another, instead of coming to an end even after this, raged on as before. And hundreds of Rakshasas were slain by the denizens of the forest, while many of the latter were slain by the former. The loss, however, in killed, of the Rakshasas was far greater than that of the monkeys. Mahabharata, Book 3, Section 286. Markandeya said, learning that Kumbhakarna had with his followers fallen in battle, as also that great warrior Prahasta and Dhumraksha too of mighty energy, Ravana then addressed his heroic son Indrajit, saying, O slayer of foes, slay thou in battle Rama and Sugriva and Lakshmana. My good son, it was by thee that this blazing fame of mine had been acquired by vanquishing in battle that wielder of the thunderbolt, the thousand-eyed lord of Sachi. Having the power of appearing and vanishing at thy will, slay thou, O smiter of foes, my enemies by means, O thou foremost of all wielders of weapons, of thy celestial arrows received as boons from the gods. Rama and Lakshmana and Sugriva are incapable of enduring the bare touch of thy weapons. What shall I say, therefore, of their followers? That cessation of hostilities which could not be brought about by either Prahasta or Kumbhakarna in battle, be it thine, O mighty armed one, to bring about. Slaying my enemies with all their army by means of thy keen-edged shafts, enhance my joy today, O son, as thou didst once before by vanquishing Vasva. Thus addressed by him. Indrajit said so be it, and encased in mail he quickly ascended his chariot, and proceeded, O king, towards the field of battle. And then that bull amongst Rakshasas, loudly announcing his own name, challenged Lakshmana, endued with auspicious marks, to a single combat. And Lakshmana, thus challenged, rushed towards that Rakshasa with his bow and arrows, and striking terror into his adversary's heart by means of the flapping of his bowstring on the leathern case of his left hand. And the encounter that took place between those warriors that defied each other's prowess, and each of whom was desirous of vanquishing the other, and both of whom were conversant with celestial weapons, was terrible in the extreme. But when the son of Ravana found that he could not by his arrows gain any advantage over his adversary, that foremost of mighty warriors mustered all his energy. And Indrajit then began to hurl at Lakshmana with great force numberless javelins. The son of Sumitra, however, cut them into fragments by means of his own keen-edged arrows. And those javelins, thus cut into pieces by the keen-edged arrows of Lakshmana, dropped down upon the ground. Then the handsome Ingadha, the son of Vali, taking up a large tree, rushed impetuously at Indrajit and struck him with it on the head. Undaunted at this, Indrajit of mighty energy sought to smite Ingadha with a lance. Just at that juncture, however, Lakshmana cut into pieces the lance taken up by Ravana's son. The son of Ravana then took up a mace and struck on the left flank that foremost of monkeys, the heroic Ingadha, who was then staying close beside him. Ingadha, the powerful son of Vali, little recking that stroke, hurled at Indrajit a mighty sal stem. And hurled in wrath by Ingadha for the destruction of Indrajit, that tree, O son of Pritha, destroyed Indrajit's chariot along with his horses and charioteer. And thereupon jumping from his horseless and driverless car, the son of Ravana disappeared from sight, O king, by aid of his powers of illusion. And beholding that Rakshasa, abundantly endued with powers of illusion, disappear so suddenly, Rama proceeded towards that spot and began to protect his troops with care. Indrajit, however, with arrows, obtained as boons from the gods, began to pierce both Rama and mighty Lakshmana in every part of their bodies. Then the heroic Rama and Lakshmana both continued to contend with their arrows against Ravana's son, who had made himself invisible by his powers of illusion. But Indrajit continued to shower in wrath all over those lions among men his keen-edged shafts by hundreds and thousands. And seeking that invisible warrior who was ceaselessly showering his arrows, the monkeys penetrated into every part of the firmament, armed with huge masses of stone. Them as well as the two brothers, however, the invisible Rakshasa began to afflict with his shafts. Indeed, the son of Ravana, concealing himself by his powers of illusion, furiously attacked the monkey host. And the heroic brothers Rama and Lakshmana, pierced all over with arrows, dropped down on the ground like the sun and the moon fallen down from the firmament. Mahabharata, Book 3, Section 287. Markandeya said, beholding both the brothers Rama and Lakshmana prostrate on the ground, the son of Ravana tied them in a network of those arrows of his which he had obtained as boons. And tied by Indrajit on the field of battle by means of that arrowy net, those heroic tigers among men resembled a couple of hawks immured in a cage. And beholding those heroes prostrate on the ground, pierced with hundreds of arrows, Sugriva with all the monkeys stood surrounding them on all sides. And the king of the monkeys stood there, accompanied by Sashina and Minda and Dvivida, and Kumuda and Ingadha and Hanuman and Nila and Tara and Nala. And Vibhishana, having achieved success in another part of the field, soon arrived at that spot, and roused those heroes from insensibility, awakening them by means of the weapon called prajna. Then Sugriva soon extracted the arrows from their bodies. And by means of that most efficacious medicine called the Vasalia, applied with celestial mantras, those human heroes regained their consciousness. And the arrow having been extracted from their bodies, those mighty warriors in a moment rose from their recumbent posture, their pains and fatigue thoroughly alleviated. And beholding Rama, the descendant of Ikshwaku's race, quite at his ease, Vibhishana, O son of Pritha, joining his hands, told him these words, O chastiser of foes, at the command of the king of the Guhyakas, a Guhyaka hath come from the White Mountains, bringing with him his water. O great king, this water is a present to thee from Kuvara, so that all creatures that are invisible may, O chastiser of foes, become visible to thee. This water laved over the eyes will make every invisible creature visible to thee, as also to any other person to whom thou mayst give it. Saying, "So be it," Rama took that sacred water and sanctified his own eyes therewith. And the high-minded Lakshmana also did the same. And Sugriva and Jambuvan, and Hanuman and Ingatha, and Minda and Dvivida, and Nila and many other foremost of the monkeys, laved their eyes with that water. And thereupon it exactly happened as Vibhishana had said, for, O Yudhishthira, soon did the eyes of all these become capable of beholding things that could not be seen by the unassisted eye. Meanwhile, Indrajit, after the success he had won, went to his father. And having informed him of the feats he had achieved, he speedily returned to the field of battle and placed himself at the van of his army. The son of Sumitra then, under Vibhishana's guidance, rushed towards that wrathful son of Ravana coming back, from desire of battle, to lead the attack. And Lakshmana, excited to fury and receiving a hint from Vibhishana, and desiring to slay Indrajit, who had not completed his daily sacrifice, smote with his arrows that warrior burning to achieve success. And desirous of vanquishing each other, the encounter that took place between them was exceedingly wonderful, like that, in days of yore, between the Lord of Celestials and Parata. And Indrajit pierced the son of Sumitra with arrows penetrating into his very vitals. And the son of Sumitra also pierced Ravana's son with arrows of fiery energy. And pierced with Lakshmana's arrows, the son of Ravana became senseless with wrath. And he shot at Lakshmana 8 shafts fierce as venomous snakes. Listen now, O Yudhishthira, as I tell thee how the heroic son of Sumitra then took his adversary's life by means of 3 winged arrows possessed of the energy and effulgence of fire. With one of these, he severed from Indrajit's body that arm of his enemy which had grasped the bow. With the second he caused that other arm which had held the arrows to drop down on the ground. With the third that was bright and possessed of the keenest edge, he cut off his head decked with a beautiful nose and bright with earrings. And shorn of arms and head, the trump became fearful to behold. And having slain the foe thus, that foremost of mighty men then slew with his arrows the charioteer of his adversary. And the horses then dragged away the empty chariot into the city. And Ravana then beheld that car without his son on it. And hearing that his son had been slain, Ravana suffered his heart to be overpowered with grief. And under the influence of extreme grief and affliction, the king of the Rakshasas suddenly cherished the desire of killing the princess of Mithila. And seizing a sword, the wicked Rakshasa hastily ran towards that lady staying within the Asoka wood, longing to behold her lord. Then Avindya, beholding that sinful purpose of the wicked wretch, appeased his fury. Listen, O Yudhishthira, to the reasons urged by Avindya. That wise Rakshasa said, placed as thou art on the blazing throne of an empire, it behoveth thee not to slay a woman. Besides, this woman is already slain, considering that she is a captive in thy power. I think she would not be slain if only her body were destroyed. Slay thou her husband. He being slain, she will be slain too. Indeed, not even he of 100 sacrifices, Indra, is thy equal in prowess. The gods with Indra at their head had repeatedly been affrighted by thee in battle. With these and many other words of the same import, Avindya succeeded in appeasing Ravana. And the latter did, indeed, listen to his counselor's speech. And that wanderer of the night, then, resolved to give battle himself, sheathed his sword, and issued orders for preparing his chariot. Footnotes 562:1 This weapon could restore an insensible warrior to consciousness, as the Sammohana weapon could deprive one of consciousness. 562:2 Visalia, a medicinal plant of great efficacy in healing cuts and wounds. It is still cultivated in several parts of Bengal. A medical friend of the writer tested the efficacy of the plant known by that name and found it to be much superior to either gallic acid or tannic acid in stopping blood. 563:1 The Guhyakas occupy, in Hindu mythology, a position next only to that of the gods, and superior to that of the Gandharvas, who are the celestial choristers. The White Mountain is another name of Kailasa, the peak where Shiva hath his abode. Mahabharata, Book 3, Section 288. Markandeya said, the ten-necked Ravana, excited to fury at the death of his beloved son, ascended his car decked with gold and gems. And surrounded by terrible Rakshasas with various kinds of weapons in their hands, Ravana rushed towards Rama, fighting with numerous monkey chief. And beholding him rushing in wrath towards the monkey army, Minda and Nila and Nala and Ingatha, and Hanuman and Jamvuman, surrounded him with all their troops. And those foremost of monkeys and bears began to exterminate with trunks of trees the soldiers of the ten-necked Ravana in his every sight. And beholding the enemy slaughtering his troops, the Rakshasa king, Ravana, possessed of great powers of illusion, began to put them forth. And forth from his body began to spring hundreds and thousands of Rakshasas armed with arrows and lances and double-edged swords in hand. Rama, however, with a celestial weapon slew all those Rakshasas. The king of the Rakshasas then once more put forth his prowess of illusion. The ten-faced, producing from his body numerous warriors resembling, O Bharata, both Rama and Lakshmana, rushed towards the two brothers. And then those Rakshasas, hostile to Rama and Lakshmana and armed with bows and arrows, rushed towards Rama, and beholding that power of illusion put forth by the king of Rakshasas, that descended of Ikshwaku's race, the son of Sumitra, addressed Rama in these heroic words, "Slay those Rakshasas, those wretches with forms like thy own." And Rama thereupon slew those and other Rakshasas of forms resembling his own. And that time Madali, the charioteer of Indra, approached Rama on the field of battle, with a car effulgent as the sun and unto which were yoked horses of a tawny hue. And Madali said, O son of Kakutsta's race, this excellent and victorious car, unto which have been yoked this pair of tawny horses, belonging to the Lord of Celestials. It is on this excellent car, O tiger among men, that Indra hath slain in battle hundreds of Daityas and Danavas. Therefore, O tiger among men, do thou, riding on the car driven by me, quickly slay Ravana in battle. Do not delay in achieving this. Thus addressed by him, the descendant of Raghu's race, however, doubted the truthful words of Madali, thinking this is another illusion produced by the Rakshasas. Vibhishana then addressed him saying, This, O tiger among men, is no illusion of the wicked Ravana. Ascend thou this chariot quickly, for this, O thou of great effulgence, belongeth to Indra. The descendant of Kakutsta then cheerfully said unto Vibhishana, So be it, and riding on that car, rushed wrathfully upon Ravana. And when Ravana, too, rushed against his antagonist, a loud wail of woe was set up by the creatures of the earth, while the celestials in heaven sent forth a leonine roar accompanied by beating of large drums. The encounter then that took place between the ten-necked Rakshasa and that prince of Raghu's race was fierce in the extreme. Indeed, that combat between them hath no parallel elsewhere. And Rakshasa hurled at Rama a terrible javelin looking like Indra's thunderbolt and resembling a Brahmana's curse on the point of utterance. Rama, however, quickly cut into fragments that javelin by means of his sharp arrows. And beholding that most difficult feat, Ravana was struck with fear. But soon his wrath was excited, and the ten-necked hero began to shower on Rama whetted arrows by thousands and tens of thousands and countless weapons of various kinds, such as rockets and javelins and maces and battle-axes and darts of various kinds and shatagnis and whetted shafts. And beholding that terrible form of illusion displayed by the ten-necked Rakshasa, the monkeys fled in fear in all directions. Then the descendant of Kakutsta, taking out of his quiver an excellent arrow furnished with handsome wings and golden feathers and a bright and beautiful head, fixed it on the bow with Brahmastra mantra. And beholding that excellent arrow transformed by Rama, with proper mantras, into a Brahma weapon, the celestials and the Gandharvas with Indra at their head began to rejoice. And the gods and the Danavas and the Kinnaras were led by the display of that Brahma weapon to regard the life of their Rakshasa foe almost closed. Then Rama shot that terrible weapon of unrivaled energy, destined to compass Ravana's death, and resembling the curse of a Brahmana on the point of utterance. And as soon, O Bharata, as that arrow was shot by Rama from his bow drawn to a circle, the Rakshasa king with his chariot and charioteer and horses blazed up, surrounded on all sides by a terrific fire. And beholding Ravana slain by Rama of famous achievements, the celestials, with the Gandharvas and the Charanas, rejoiced exceedingly. And deprived of universal dominion by the energy of the Brahma weapon, the five elements forsook the illustrious Ravana, and were consumed by the Brahma weapon, the physical ingredients of Ravana's body. His flesh and blood were all reduced to nothingness, so that the ashes even could not be seen. Footnotes. 565:1 According to both Vyasa and Valmiki, there is nothing so fierce as a Brahmana's curse. The very thunderbolt of Indra is weak compared to a Brahmana's curse. The reason is obvious. The thunder smites the individual at whom it may be aimed. The curse of Brahmana smites the whole race, whole generation, whole country. Mahabharata, Book 3, Section 289. Markandeya said, having slain Ravana, that wretched king of the Rakshasas and foe of the celestials, Rama with his friends and Sumitra's son rejoiced exceedingly. And after the 10-necked Rakshasa hath been slain, the celestials with the rishis at their head worshipped Rama of mighty arms, blessing and uttering the word Jaya repeatedly. And all the celestials and the Gandharvas and the denizens of the celestial regions gratified Rama of eyes like lotus leaves, with hymns and flowery showers. And having duly worshipped Rama, they all went away to those regions whence they had come. And, O thou of unfading glory, the firmament at that time looked as if a great festival was being celebrated. And having slain the 10-necked Rakshasa, the Lord Rama of worldwide fame, that conqueror of hostile cities, bestowed Lanka on Vibhishana. Then that old and wise counselor of Ravana, known by the name of Avindhya, with Sita walking before him but behind Vibhishana, who was at the front, came out of the city. And with great humility Avindhya said unto the illustrious descendant of Kakutstha, O illustrious one, accept thou this goddess, Janaka's daughter of excellent conduct. Hearing these words, the descendant of Ikshwaku's race alighted from his excellent chariot and beheld Sita bathed in tears. And beholding that beautiful lady seated within her vehicle, afflicted with grief, besmeared with filth, with matted locks on head, and attired in dirty robes, Rama, afraid of the loss of his honor, said unto her, Daughter of Videha, go whithersoever thou likest. Thou art now free. What should have been done by me, hath been done. O blessed lady, owning me for thy husband, it is not meet that thou shouldst grow old in the abode of the Rakshasa. It is for this I have slain that wanderer of the night. But how can one like us, acquainted with every truth of morality, embrace even for a moment a woman that had fallen into others' hands? O princess of Mithila, whether thou art chaste or unchaste, I dare not enjoy thee, now that thou art like sacrificial butter lapped by a dog. Hearing these cruel words, that adorable girl suddenly fell down in great affliction of heart, like a plantain tree severed from its roots. And the color that was suffusing her face in consequence of the joy she had felt quickly disappeared, like watery particles on a mirror blown thereon by the breath of the mouth. And hearing these words of Rama, all the monkeys also with Lakshmana became still as dead. Then the divine and pure-souled Brahma of 4 faces, that creator of the universe himself sprung from a lotus, showed himself on his car to Raghu's son. And Sakra and Agni and Vayu, and Yama and Varuna and the illustrious lord of the Ikshas, and the holy rishis, and King Dasaratha also in a celestial and effulgent form and on cars drawn by swans, showed themselves. And then the firmament crowded with celestials and Gandharvas became as beautiful as the autumnal welkin spangled with stars. And rising up from the ground, the blessed and famous princess of Videha, in the midst of those present spoke unto Rama of wide chest, these words, O prince, I impute no fault to thee, for thou art well acquainted with the behavior that one should adopt towards both men and women. But hear thou these words of mine. The ever-moving air is always present within every creature. If I have sinned, let him forsake my vital forces. If I have sinned, then let fire, and water, and space, and earth, like air, whom I have already invoked, also forsake my vital forces. And as, O hero, I have never, even in my dreams, cherished the image of any other person, so be thou my lord as appointed by the gods. After Sita had spoken, a sacred voice, resounding through the whole of that region, was heard in the skies, gladdening the hearts of the high-souled monkeys. And the wind god was heard to say, O son of Raghu, what Sita hath said is true. I am the god of wind. The princess of Mithila is sinless. Therefore, O king, be united with thy wife. And the god of fire said, O son of Raghu, I dwell within the bodies of all creatures. O descendant of Kakutstha, the princess of Mithila is not guilty of even the minutest fault. And Varuna then said, O son of Raghu, the humors in every creature's body derive their existence from me. I tell thee, let the princess of Mitilav be accepted by thee. And Brahma himself then said, O descendant of Kakutsta, O son, and thee that art honest and pure and conversant with the duties of royal sages, this conduct is not strange. Listen, however, to these words of mine. Thou hast, O hero, slain this enemy of the gods, the Gandharvas, the Nagas, the Yakshas, the Danavas, and the great Rishis. It was through my grace that he had hitherto been unslayable of all creatures. And indeed, it was for some reason that I had tolerated him for some time. The wretch, however, abducted Sita for his own destruction. And as regards Sita, I protected her through Nalakuvara's curse. For that person had cursed Ravana of old, saying that if he ever approached an unwilling woman, his head should certainly be split into 100 fragments. Let no suspicion, therefore, be thine. O thou of great glory, accept thy wife. Thou hast indeed achieved a mighty feat for the benefit of the gods, O thou that art of divine effulgence. And last of all Dasaratha said, I have been gratified with thee, O child. Blessed be thou, I am thy father Dasaratha. I command thee to take back thy wife, and rule thy kingdom, O thou foremost of men. Rama then replied, If thou art my father, I salute thee with reverence, O king of kings. I shall indeed return, at thy command, to the delightful city of Ayodhya. Markandeya continued, thus addressed, his father, O bull of the Bharata race, gladly answered Rama, the corners of whose eyes were of a reddish hue, saying, Return to Ayodhya and rule thou that kingdom. O thou of great glory, thy 14 years of exile have been completed. Thus addressed by Dasaratha, Rama bowed to the gods, and saluted by his friends he was united with his wife, like the lord of the celestials with the daughter of Puloman. And that chastiser of foes then gave a boon to Avindhya. And he also bestowed both riches and honors on the Rakshasa woman named Trijata. And when Brahma with all the celestials having India at their head, said unto Rama, O thou that ownest Kausalya for thy mother, what boons after thy heart shall we grant thee? Rama, thereupon, prayed them to grant him firm adherence to virtues and invincibility in respect of all foes. And he also asked for the restoration to life of all those monkeys that had been slain by the Rakshasas, and after Brahma had said so be it, those monkeys, O king, restored to life, rose up from the field of battle, and Sita too, of great good fortune, granted unto Hanuman a boon, saying, Let thy life, O son, last as long as the fame of Rama's achievements. And, O Hanuman of yellow eyes, let celestial viands and drinks be ever available to thee through my grace. Then the celestials with Indra at their head all disappeared in the very sight of those warriors of spotless achievements. And beholding Rama united with the daughter of Janaka, the charioteer of Sakra, highly pleased, addressed him in the midst of friends, and said these words, O thou of prowess that can never be baffled, thou hast dispelled the sorrow of the celestials, the Gandharvas, the Yakshas, the Asuras, the Nagas, and human beings. As long, therefore, as the earth will hold together, so long will all creatures with the celestials, the Asuras, the Gandharvas, the Yakshas, the Rakshasas, and the Panagas speak of thee. And having said these words unto Rama, Madali worshipped that son of Raghu, and having obtained the leave of that foremost of wielders of weapons, he went away, on that same chariot of solar effulgence. And Rama also, with Sumatra's son and Vibhishana, and accompanied by all the monkeys with Sugriva at their head, placing Sita in the van and having made arrangements for the protection of Lanka, recrossed the ocean by the same bridge. And he rode on that beautiful and sky-ranging chariot called the Pushpaka that was capable of going everywhere at the will of the rider. And that subduer of passions was surrounded by his principal counselors in order of precedence. And arriving at that part of the seashore where he had formerly laid himself down, the virtuous king, with all the monkeys, pitched his temporary abode. And the son of Raghu then, bringing the monkeys before him in due time, worshipped them all, and gratifying them with presents of jewels and gems, dismissed them one after another. And after all the monkey chiefs, and the apes with bovine tails, and the bears, had gone away, Rama re-entered Kishkindiya with Sugriva. And accompanied by both Vibhishana and Sugriva, Rama re-entered Kishkindiya riding on the Pushpaka car and showing the princess of Videha the woods along the way. And having arrived at Kishkindia, Rama, that foremost of all smiters, installed the successful Angadha as prince regent of the kingdom. And accompanied by the same friends as also by Sumitra's son, Rama proceeded towards his city along the same path by which he had come. And having reached the city of Ayodhya, the king dispatched Hanuman thence as envoy to Bharata. And Hanuman, having ascertained Bharata's intentions from external indications, gave him the good news of Rama's arrival. And after the son of Pavna had come back, Rama entered Nandigrama. And having entered that town, Rama beheld Bharata besmeared with filth and attired in rags, and seated with his elder brother's sandals placed before him. And being united, O bull of Bharata race, with both Bharata and Shatrughna, the mighty son of Raghu, along with Sumitra's son, began to rejoice exceedingly. And Bharata and Shatrughna also, united with their eldest brother, and beholding Sita, both derived great pleasure. And Bharata then, after having worshipped his returned brother, made over to him with great pleasure the kingdom that had been in his hands as a sacred trust. And Vasishtha and Vamadeva then together installed that hero in the sovereignty of Ayodhya at the 8th Muhurta of the day under the asterism called Shravana. And after his installation was over, Rama gave leave to well-pleased Sugriva the king of the monkeys, along with all his followers, as also to rejoicing Vibhishana of Pulasudya's race, to return to their respective abodes. And having worshipped them with various articles of enjoyment, and done everything that was suitable to the occasion, Rama dismissed those friends of his with a sorrowful heart. And the son of Raghu then, having worshipped that Pushpaka chariot, joyfully gave it back unto Vaishravana. And then, assisted by the celestial Rishi, Vasishtha, Rama performed on the banks of the Gomathi 10 horse sacrifices without obstruction of any kind and with treble presents unto Brahmanas. Footnotes 569:1 Abhijit is lit, the 8th Muhurta of the day, a Muhurta being equal to an hour of 48 minutes, i.e. the 30th part of a whole day and night. The Vaishnava asterism is as explained by Nilkantha, the Sravava. Mahabharata, Book 3, Section 290. Markandeya said, "It was thus, O mighty armed one, that Rama of immeasurable energy had suffered of old such excessive calamity in consequence of his exile in the woods. O tiger among men, do not grieve, for, O chastiser of foes, thou art Kshatriya. Thou too treadest in the path in which strength of arms is to be put forth, the path that leadeth to tangible rewards. Thou hast not even a particle of sin. Even the celestials with Indra at their head, and the Asuras have to tread in the path that is trod by thee. It was after such afflictions that the wielder of the thunderbolt, aided by the Maruts, slew Vritra, and the invincible Namuchi and the Rakshasi of long tongue. He that hath assistance always secureth the accomplishment of all his purposes. What is that which cannot be vanquished in battle by him that hath Dhananjaya for his brother? This Bhima, also, of terrible prowess, is the foremost of mighty persons. The heroic and youthful sons of Madravati again are mighty bowmen. With allies such as these, why dost thou despair, O chastiser of foes? These are capable of vanquishing the army of the wielder himself of the thunderbolt with the Maruts in the midst. Having these mighty bowmen of celestial forms for thy allies, thou, O bull of Bharata race, art sure to conquer in battle all thy foes. Behold, this Krishna, the daughter of Drupada, forcibly abducted by the wicked-minded Saint Hava from pride of strength and energy, hath been brought back by these mighty warriors after achieving terrible feats. Behold, King Jayadratha was vanquished and lay powerless before thee. The princess of Videha was rescued with almost no allies by Rama after the slaughter in battle of the 10-necked Rakshasa of terrible prowess. Indeed, the allies of Rama, in that contest, were monkeys and black-faced bears, creatures that were not even human. Think of all this, O king, in thy mind. Therefore, O foremost of Kurus, grieve not for all that hath occurred, O bull of the Bharata race. Illustrious persons like thee never indulge in sorrow, O smiter of foes." Vaisampayana continued, "It was thus that the king was comforted by Markandeya. And then that high-souled one, casting off his sorrows, once more spoke unto Markandeya. Pativrata Mahatmya Parva. Mahabharata, Book 3, Section 291. Yudhishthira said, O mighty sage, I do not so much grieve for myself or these my brothers or the loss of my kingdom as I do for this daughter of Drupada. When we were afflicted at the game of the dice by those wicked-souled ones, it was Krishna that delivered us. And she was forcibly carried off from the forest by Jayadratha. Hast thou even seen or heard of any chaste and exalted lady that resembleth this daughter of Drupada? Markandeya said, Listen, O king, how the exalted merit of chaste ladies, O Yudhishthira, was completely obtained by a princess named Savitri. There was a king among the Madras, who was virtuous and highly pious. And he always ministered unto the Brahmanas, and was high-souled and firm in promise. And he was of subdued senses, and given to sacrifices. And he was the foremost of givers, and was able, and beloved by both the citizens and the rural population. And the name of that lord of earth was Aswapati. And he was intent on the welfare of all beings. And that forgiving monarch of truthful speech and subdued senses was without issue. And when he got old, he was stricken with grief at this. And with the object of raising offspring, he observed rigid vows and began to live upon frugal fare, having recourse to the Brahmacharya mode of life, and restraining his senses. And that best of kings, daily, offering 10,000 oblations to the fire, recited mantras in honor of Savitri, and ate temperately at the 6th hour. And he passed 18 years, practicing such vows. Then when the 18 years were full, Savitri was pleased with him. And O king, issuing with great delight, in embodied form, from the Agnihotra fire, the goddess showed herself to that king. And intent on conferring boons, she spoke these words unto the monarch, I have been gratified, O king, with thy Brahmacharya practices, thy purity and self-restraint and observance of vows, and all thy endeavors and veneration. Do thou, O mighty king, O Aswapati, ask for the boon that thou desirest. Thou ought, however, by no means show any disregard for virtue. Thereat Aswapati said, It is with the desire of attaining virtue that I have been engaged in this task. O goddess, may many sons be born unto me worthy of my race. If thou art pleased with me, O goddess, I ask for this boon. The twice-born ones have assured me that great merit lieth in having offspring. Savitri replied, O king, having already learnt this thy intention, I had spoken unto that lord, the grandsire, about thy sons. Through the favor granted by the Self-Create, there shall speedily be born unto thee on earth a daughter of great energy. It behoveth thee not to make any reply. Well pleased, I tell thee this at the command of the grandsire. Markandeya said, having accepted Savitri's words and saying, So be it, the king again gratified her and said, May this happen soon. On Savitri vanishing away, the monarch entered his own city. And that hero began to live in his kingdom, ruling his subjects righteously. And when some time had elapsed, that king, observant of vows, begot offspring on his eldest queen engaged in the practice of virtue. And then, O bull of the Bharata race, the embryo in the womb of the princess of Malava increased like the lord of stars in the heavens during the lighted fortnight. And when the time came, she brought forth a daughter furnished with lotus-like eyes. And that best of monarchs joyfully performed the usual ceremonies on her behalf. And as she had been bestowed with delight by the goddess Savitri by virtue of the oblations offered in honor of that goddess, both her father and the Brahmanas named her Savitri. And the king's daughter grew like unto Shri herself in an embodied form. And in due time, that damsel attained her puberty. And beholding that graceful maiden of slender waist and ample hips, and resembling a golden image, people thought, We have received a goddess. And overpowered by her energy, none could wed that girl of eyes like lotus leaves, and possessed of a burning splendor. And it came to pass that once on the occasion of a parva, having fasted and bathed her head, she presented herself before the family deity and caused the Brahmanas to offer oblations with due rites to the sacrificial fire. And taking the flowers that had been offered to the god, that lady, beautiful as Shri herself, went to her high-souled sire. And having reverenced the feet of her father and offering him the flowers she had brought, that maiden of exceeding grace, with joined hands, stood at the side of the king. And seeing his own daughter resembling a celestial damsel arrived at puberty, and unsought by people, the king became sad. And the king said, Daughter, the time for bestowing thee is come. Yet none asketh thee. Do thou, therefore, thyself seek for a husband equal to thee in qualities. That person who may be desired by thee should be notified to me. Do thou choose for thy husband as thou listest. I shall bestow thee with deliberation. Do thou, O auspicious one, listen to me as I tell thee the words which I heard recited by the twice-born ones. The father that doth not bestow his daughter cometh by disgrace. And the husband that knoweth not his wife in her season meeteth with disgrace. And the son that doth not protect his mother when her husband is dead also suffereth disgrace. Hearing these words of mine, do thou engage thyself in search of a husband. Do thou act in such a way that we may not be censured by the gods. Markandeya said, having said these words to his daughter and his old counselors, he instructed the attendants to follow her, saying, Go. Thereat, bashfully bowing down unto her father's feet, the meek maid went out without hesitation, in compliance with the words of her sire. And ascending a golden car, she went to the delightful asylum of the royal sages, accompanied by her father's aged counselors. There, O son, worshipping the feet of the aged ones, she gradually began to roam over all the woods. Thus the king's daughter, distributing wealth in all sacred regions, ranged the various places belonging to the foremost of the twice-born ones. Footnotes 570:1 also called Gayatri, the wife of Brahma. Mahabharata, Book 3, Section 292. Markandeya continued, on one occasion, O Bharata, when that king, the lord of the Madras, was seated with Narada in the midst of his court, engaged in conversation, Savitri, accompanied by the king's counselors, came to her father's abode after having visited various sacred regions and asylums. And beholding her father seated with Narada, she worshipped the feet of both by bending down her head. And Narada then said, Whither had this thy daughter gone? And, O king, whence also doth she come? Why also dost thou not bestow her on a husband, now that she hath arrived at the age of puberty? Aswapati answered, saying, Surely it was on this very business that she had been sent, and she returneth now from her search. Do thou, O celestial sage, listen, even from her as to the husband she hath chosen herself. Markandeya continued, Then the blessed maid, commanded by her father with the words, Relate everything in detail, regarded those words of her sire as if they were those of a god, and spoke unto him thus, There was, amongst the Sulwas, a virtuous Kshatriya king known by the name of Dayumatsana. And it came to pass that in course of time he became blind. And that blind king, possessed of wisdom, had an only son. And it so happened that an old enemy dwelling in the vicinity, taking advantage of the king's mishap, deprived him of his kingdom. And thereupon the monarch, accompanied by his wife bearing a child on her breast, went into the woods. And having retired into the forests, he adopted great vows and began to practice ascetic austerities. And his son, born in the city, began to grow in the hermitage. That youth, fit to be my husband, I have accepted in my heart for my lord. At these words of hers, Narada said, Alas, O king, Savitri hath committed a great wrong, since, not knowing, she hath accepted for her lord this Sadhyavan of excellent qualities. His father speaketh the truth, and his mother also is truthful in her speech. And it is for this that the Brahmanas have named the son Sadhyavan. In his childhood he took great delight in horses, and used to make horses of clay. And he used also to draw pictures of horses. And for this that youth is sometimes called by the name of Chitraswa. The king then asked, And is Prince Sadhyavan, who is devoted to his father, endued with energy and intelligence and forgiveness and courage? Narada replied, saying, In energy Sadhyavan is like unto the sun, and in wisdom like unto Vrihaspati. And he is brave like unto the Lord of the celestials, and forgiving like unto the earth herself. Aswapati then said, And is the Prince Sadhyavan liberal in gifts and devoted to the Brahmanas? Is he handsome and magnanimous and lovely to behold? Narada said, In bestowal of gifts according to his power, the mighty son of Dayumatsana is like unto Sankriti's son Rantadeva. In truthfulness of speech and devotion unto Brahmanas, he is like Sivi, the son of Usanara. And he is magnanimous like Yayati, and beautiful like the moon. And in beauty of person he is like either of the twin Ashwins. And with senses under control, he is meek and brave and truthful. And with passion and subjection he is devoted to his friends, and free from malice and modest and patient. Indeed, briefly speaking, they that are possessed of great ascetic merit and are of exalted character say that he is always correct in his conduct and that honor is firmly seated on his brow. Hearing this, Aswapati said, O reverend sage, thou tellest me that he is possessed of every virtue. Do thou now tell me his defects if, indeed, he hath any. Narada then said, He hath one only defect that hath overwhelmed all his virtues. That defect is incapable of being conquered by even the greatest efforts. He hath only one defect, and no other. Within a year from this day, Sadhyavan, endued with a short life, will cast off his body. Hearing these words of the sage, the king said, Come, O Savitri, go thou and choose another for thy lord, O beautiful damsel. That one great defect, in this youth, existeth, covering all his merits. The illustrious Narada, honored by even the gods, saith that Sadhyavan will have to cast off his body within a year, his days being numbered. At these words of her father, Savitri said, The death can fall but once, a daughter can be given away but one, and once only can a person say, I give away. These three things can take place only once. Indeed, with a life short or long, possessed of virtues or bereft of them, I have, for once, selected my husband. Twice I shall not select. Having first settled a thing mentally, it is expressed in words, and then it is carried out into practice. Of this my mind is an example. Narada then said, O best of men, the heart of thy daughter Savitri wavereth not. It is not possible by any means to make her swerve from this path of virtue. In no other person are those virtues that dwell in Sadhyavan. The bestowal of thy daughter, therefore, is approved by me. The king said, What thou hast said, O illustrious one, should never be disobeyed, for thy words are true. And I shall act as thou hast said, since thou art my preceptor. Narada said, May the bestowal of thy daughter Savitri be attended with peace. I shall now depart. Blessed be all of ye. Markandeya continued, Having said this, Narada rose up into the sky and went to heaven. On the other hand, the king began to make preparations for his daughter's wedding. Mahabharata, Book 3, Section 293. Markandeya said, having pondered over these words of Narada about his daughter's marriage, the king began to make arrangements about the nuptials. And summoning all the old Brahmanas and Ritwijas together with the priests, he set out with his daughter on an auspicious day. And arriving at the asylum of Dayumatsana in the sacred forest, the king approached the royal sage on foot, accompanied by the twice-born ones. And there he beheld the blind monarch of great wisdom seated on a cushion of kusa grass spread under Sala tree. And after duly reverencing the royal sage, the king in an humble speech introduced himself. Thereupon, offering him the arugya, a seat, and a cow, the monarch asked his royal guest, Wherefore is this visit? Thus addressed the king disclosed everything about his intentions and purpose with reference to Sadhyavan. And Aswapati said, O royal sage, this beautiful girl is my daughter named Savitri. O thou versed in morality, do thou, agreeably to the customs of our order, take her from me as thy daughter-in-law. Hearing these words, Dayumatsana said, Deprived of kingdom, and taking up our abode in the woods, we are engaged in the practice of virtue as ascetics with regulated lives. Unworthy of a forest life, how will thy daughter, living in the sylvan asylum, bear this hardship? Aswapati said, When my daughter knoweth, as well as myself, that happiness and misery come and go, without either being stationary, such words as these are not fit to be used towards one like me. O king, I have come hither, having made up my mind. I have bowed to thee from friendship, it behoveth thee not, therefore, to destroy my hope. It behoveth thee not, also, to disregard me who, moved by love, have come to thee. Thou art my equal and fit for an alliance with me, as indeed I am thy equal and fit for alliance with thee. Do thou, therefore, accept my daughter for thy daughter-in-law and the wife of the good Sadhyavan. Hearing these words, Dayumatsana said, Formerly I had desired an alliance with thee. But I hesitated, being subsequently deprived of my kingdom. Let this wish, therefore, that I had formerly entertained, be accomplished this very day. Thou art, indeed, a welcome guest to me." Then summoning all the twice-born ones residing in the hermitages of that forest, the two kings caused the union to take place with due rites. And having bestowed his daughter with suitable robes and ornaments, Aswapati went back to his abode in great joy. And Satyavan, having obtained a wife possessed of every accomplishment, became highly glad, while she also rejoiced exceedingly upon having gained the husband after her own heart. And when her father had departed, she put off all her ornaments, and clad herself in barks and cloths dyed in red. And by her services and virtues, her tenderness and self-denial, and by her agreeable offices unto all, she pleased everybody. And she gratified her mother-in-law by attending to her person and by covering her with robes and ornaments. And she gratified her father-in-law by worshipping him as a god and controlling her speech. And she pleased her husband by her honeyed speeches, her skill in every kind of work, the evenness of her temper, and by the indications of her love in private. And thus, O Bharata, living in the asylum of those pious dwellers of the forest, they continued for some time to practice ascetic austerities. But the words spoken by Narada were present night and day in the mind of the sorrowful Savitri. Mahabharata, Book 3, Section 294. Markandeya said, "At length, O king, after a long time had passed away, the hour that had been appointed for the death of Satyavan arrived. And as the words that had been spoken by Narada were ever present in the mind of Savitri, she had counted the days as they passed. And having ascertained that her husband would die on the 4th day following, the damsel fasted day and night, observing the Triratra vow. And hearing of her vow, the king became exceedingly sorrow, and rising up soothed Savitri, and said these words, 'This vow that thou hast begun to observe, O daughter of a king, is exceedingly hard, for it is extremely difficult to fast for 3 nights together.' And hearing these words, Savitri said, 'Thou needst not be sorry, O father. This vow I shall be able to observe. I have for certain undertaken this task with perseverance, and perseverance is the cause of the successful observance of vows.' And having listened to her, Dayumatsana said, 'I can by no means say unto thee, Do thou break thy vow. One like me should, on the contrary, say, Do thou complete thy vow.' And having said this to her, the high-minded Dayumatsana stopped. And Savitri, continuing to fast, began to look lean, like a wooden doll. And, O bull of the Bharata race, thinking that her husband would die on the morrow, the woe-stricken Savitri, observing a fast, spent that night in extreme anguish. And when the sun had risen about a couple of hands, Savitri, thinking within herself, today is that day, finished her morning rites, and offered oblations to the flaming fire. And bowing down unto the aged Brahmanas, and her father-in-law and mother-in-law, she stood before them with joined hands, concentrating her senses. And for the welfare of Savitri, all the ascetics dwelling in that hermitage uttered the auspicious benediction that she should never suffer widowhood. And Savitri, immersed in contemplation, accepted those words of the ascetics, mentally saying, 'So be it,' and the king's daughter, reflecting on those words of Narada, remained, expecting the hour and the moment. Then, O best of the Bharatas, well pleased, her father-in-law and mother-in-law said these words unto the princess seated in a corner, 'Thou hast completed the vow as prescribed. The time for thy meal hath now arrived, therefore, do thou what is proper.' Thereat Savitri said, 'Now that I have completed the purposed vow, I will eat when the sun goes down. Even this is my heart's resolve, and this my vow.' Markandeya continued, and when Savitri had spoken thus about her meal, Satyavan, taking his axe upon his shoulders, set out for the woods. And at this, Savitri said unto her husband, 'It behoveth thee not to go alone. I will accompany thee. I cannot bear to be separated from thee.' Hearing these words of hers, Satyavan said, 'Thou hast never before repaired to the forest. And, O lady, the forest paths are hard to pass. Besides, thou hast been reduced by fast on account of thy vow. How wouldst thou, therefore, be able to walk on foot?' Thus addressed, Savitri said, 'I do not feel languor because of the fast, nor do I feel exhaustion. And I have made up my mind to go. It behoveth thee not, therefore, to prevent me.' At this, Satyavan said, "If thou desirest to go, I will gratify that desire of thine. Do thou, however, take the permission of my parents, so that I may be guilty of no fault." Markandeya continued, thus addressed by her lord, Savitri of high vows saluted her father-in-law and mother-in-law and addressed them, saying, "This my husband goeth to the forest for procuring fruits. Permitted by my revered lady mother and father-in-law, I will accompany him. For today I cannot bear to be separated from him. Thy son goeth out for the sake of the sacrificial fire and for his reverend superiors. He ought not, therefore, to be dissuaded. Indeed, he could be dissuaded if he went into the forest on any other errand. Do ye not prevent me? I will go into the forest with him. It is a little less than a year that I have not gone out of the asylum. Indeed, I am extremely desirous of beholding the blossoming woods." Hearing these words, Dayumatsana said, "Since Savitri hath been bestowed by her father as my daughter-in-law, I do not remember that she hath ever spoken any words couching a request. Let my daughter-in-law, therefore, have her will in this matter. Do thou, however, O daughter, act in such a way that Satyavan's work may not be neglected." Markandeya continued, having received the permission of both, the illustrious Savitri departed with her lord, and seeming smiles, although her heart was racked with grief. And that lady of large eyes went on, beholding picturesque and delightful woods inhabited by swarms of peacocks. And Satyavan sweetly said unto Savitri, "Behold these rivers of sacred currents and these excellent trees decked with flowers." But the faultless Savitri continued to watch her lord in all his moods, and recollecting the words of the celestial sage, she considered her husband as already dead. And with heart cleft in twain, that damsel, replying to her lord, softly followed him expecting that hour. Mahabharata, Book 3, Section 295. Markandeya said, "The powerful Satyavan then, accompanied by his wife, plucked fruits and filled his wallet with them. And he then began to fell branches of trees. And as he was hewing them, he began to perspire. And in consequence of that exercise his head began to ache. And afflicted with toil, he approached his beloved wife, and addressed her, saying, O Savitri, owing to this hard exercise my head acheth, and all my limbs and my heart also are afflicted sorely. O thou of restrained speech, I think myself unwell, I feel as if my head is being pierced with numerous darts. Therefore, O auspicious lady, I wish to sleep, for I have not the power to stand." Hearing these words, Savitri, quickly advancing, approached her husband, and sat down upon the ground, placing his head upon her lap. And that helpless lady, thinking of Narada's words, began to calculate the appointed division of the day, the hour, and the moment. The next moment she saw a person clad in red attire with his head decked with a diadem. And his body was of large proportions and effulgent as the sun. And he was of a darkish hue, had red eyes, carried a noose in his hand, and was dreadful to behold. And he was standing beside Satyavan and was steadfastly gazing at him. And seeing him, Savitri gently placed her husband's head on the ground, and rising suddenly, with a trembling heart, spake these words in distressful accents, "Seeing this thy superhuman form, I take thee to be a deity. If thou wilt, tell me, O chief of the gods, who thou art and what also thou intendest to do." Thereat, Yama replied, "O Savitri, thou art ever devoted to thy husband, and thou art also endued with ascetic merit. It is for this reason that I hold converse with thee. Do thou, O auspicious one, know me for Yama. This thy lord Satyavan, the son of a king, hath his days run out. I shall, therefore, take him away binding him in this noose. Know this to be my errand." At these words Savitri said, "I had heard that thy emissaries come to take away mortals, O worshipful one. Why then, O Lord, hast thou come in person?" Markandeya continued, thus addressed by her, the illustrious lord of Pitris, with a view to oblige her, began to unfold to her truly all about his intentions. And Yama said, "This prince is endued with virtues and beauty of person, and is a sea of accomplishments. He deserveth not to be borne away by my emissaries. Therefore is it that I have come personally." Saying this, Yama by main force pulled out of the body of Satyavan a person of the measure of the thumb, bound in noose and completely under subjection. And when Satyavan's life had thus been taken out, the body, deprived of breath, and shorn of luster, and destitute of motion, became unsightly to behold. And binding Satyavan's vital essence, Yama proceeded in a southerly direction. Thereupon, with heart overwhelmed in grief, the exalted Savitri, ever devoted to her lord and crowned with success in respect of her vows, began to follow Yama. And at this, Yama said, "Desist, O Savitri. Go back, and perform the funeral obsequies of thy lord. Thou art freed from all thy obligations to thy lord. Thou hast come as far as it is possible to come." Savitri replied, "Whither my husband is being carried, or whither he goeth of his own accord, I will follow him thither. This is the eternal custom. By virtue of my asceticism, of my regard for my superiors, of my affection for my lord, of my observance of vows, as well as of thy favor, my course is unimpeded. It hath been declared by wise men endued with true knowledge that by walking only 7 paces with another, one contracteth a friendship with one's companion. Keeping that friendship, which I have contracted with thee, in view, I shall speak to thee something. Do thou listen to it. They that have not their souls under control acquire not merit by leading the 4 successive modes of life, viz., celibacy with study, domesticity, retirement into the woods, and renunciation of the world. That which is called religious merit is said to consist of true knowledge. The wise, therefore, have declared religious merit to be the foremost of all things, and not the passage through the 4 successive modes. By practicing the duties of even one of these 4 modes agreeable to the directions of the wise, we have attained to true merit, and, therefore, we do not desire the 2nd or the 3rd mode, viz., celibacy with study or renunciation. It is for this again that the wise have declared religious merit to be the foremost of all things. Hearing these words of hers, Yama said, "Do thou desist. I have been pleased with these words of thine couched in proper letters and accents, and based on reason. Do thou ask for a boon. Accept the life of thy husband, O thou of faultless features, I will bestow on thee any boon that thou mayst solicit." Hearing these words, Savitri said, "Deprived of his kingdom and bereft also of sight, my father-in-law leadeth a life of retirement in our sylvan asylum. Let that king through thy favor attain his eyesight, and become strong like either fire or the sun." Yama said, "O thou of faultless features, I grant thee this boon. It will even be as thou hast said. It seems that thou art fatigued with thy journey. Do thou desist, therefore, and return. Suffer not thyself to be weary any longer." Savitri said, "What weariness can I feel in the presence of my husband? The lot that is my husband's is certainly mine also. Whither thou carriest my husband, thither will I also repair. O chief of the celestials, do thou again listen to me. Even a single interview with the pious is highly desirable, friendship with them is still more so. And intercourse with the virtuous can never be fruitless. Therefore, one should live in the company of the righteous." Yama said, "These words that thou hast spoken, so fraught with useful instruction, delight the heart and enhance the wisdom of even the learned. Therefore, O lady, solicit thou a 2nd boon, accept the life of Satyavan." Savitri said, "Sometime before, my wise and intelligent father-in-law was deprived of his kingdom. May that monarch regain his kingdom. And may that superior of mine never renounce his duties. Even this is the 2nd boon that I solicit." Then Yama said, "The king shall soon regain his kingdom. Nor shall he ever fall off from his duties. Thus, O daughter of a king, have I fulfilled thy desire. Do thou now desist. Return. Do not take any future trouble." Savitri said, "Thou hast restrained all creatures by thy decrees, and it is by thy decrees that thou takest them away, not according to thy will. Therefore it is, O God, O Divine One, that people call thee Yama. Do thou listen to the words that I say. The eternal duty of the good towards all creatures is never to injure them in thought, word, and deed, but to bear them love and give them their due. As regards this world, everything here is like this husband of mine. Men are destitute of both devotion and skill. The good, however, show mercy to even their foes when these seek their protection." Yama said, "As water to the thirsty soul, so are these words uttered by thee to me. Therefore, do thou, O fair lady, if thou will, once again ask for any boon except Salyavana's life. At these words Savitri replied, That Lord of Earth, my father, is without sons. That he may have 100 sons begotten of his loins, so that his line may be perpetuated, is the third boon I would ask of thee. Yama said, Thy sire, O auspicious lady, shall obtain 100 illustrious sons, who will perpetuate and increase their father's race. Now, O daughter of a king, thou hast obtained thy wish. Do thou desist? Thou hast come far enough. Savitri said, Staying by the side of my husband, I am not conscious of the length of the way I have walked. Indeed, my mind rusheth to yet a longer way of. Do thou again, as thou goest on, listen to the words that I will presently utter. Thou art the powerful son of Vivasvat. It is for this that thou art called Vivaswata by the wise. And, O Lord, since thou dealest out equal law unto all created things, thou hast been designated the Lord of justice. One reposeth not, even in one's own self, the confidence that one doth in the righteous. Therefore, every one wisheth particularly for intimacy with the righteous. It is goodness of heart alone that inspireth the confidence of all creatures. And it is for this that people rely particularly on the righteous. And hearing these words, Yama said, The words that thou utterest, O fair lady, I have not heard from any one save thee. I am highly pleased with this speech of thine. Accept the life of Sadyavan, solicit thou, therefore, a fourth boon, and then go thy way. Savitri then said, Both of me and Sadyavan's loins, begotten by both of us, let there be a century of sons possessed of strength and prowess and capable of perpetuating our race. Even this is the fourth boon that I would beg of thee. Hearing these words of hers, Yama replied, Thou shalt, O lady, obtain a century of sons, possessed of strength and prowess, and causing thee great delight, O daughter of a king, let no more weariness be thine. Do thou desist? Thou hast already come too far. Thus addressed, Savitri said, They that are righteous always practice eternal morality. And the communion of the pious with the pious is never fruitless. Nor is there any danger to the pious from those that are pious. And verily it is the righteous who by their truth make the sun move in the heaven. And it is the righteous that support the earth by their austerities. And, O king, it is the righteous upon whom both the past and the future depend. Therefore, they that are righteous are never cheerless in the company of the righteous. Knowing this to be the eternal practice of the good and righteous, they that are righteous continue to do good to others without expecting any benefit in return. A good office is never thrown away on the good and virtuous. Neither interest nor dignity suffereth any injury by such an act. And since such conduct ever adheres to the righteous often become the protectors of all. Hearing these words of hers, Yama replied, The more thou utterest such speeches that are pregnant with great import, full of honeyed phrases, instinct with morality, and agreeable to mind, the more is the respect that I feel for thee. O thou that art so devoted to thy Lord, ask for some incomparable boon. Thus addressed, Savitri said, O bestower of honors, the boon thou hast already given me is incapable of accomplishment without union with my husband. Therefore, among other boons, I ask for this, may this Sadyavan be restored to life. Deprived of my husband, I am as one dead. Without my husband, I do not wish for happiness. Without my husband, I do not wish for heaven itself. Without my husband, I do not wish for prosperity. Without my husband, I cannot make up my mind to live. Thou thyself hast bestowed on me the boon, namely, of a century of sons, yet thou takest away my husband. I ask for this boon, may Sadyavan be restored to life, for by that thy words will be made true. Markandeya continued, thereupon saying, So be it, Vivasvat's son, Yama, the dispenser of justice, untied his noose, and with cheerful heart said these words to Savitri, Thus, O auspicious and chaste lady, is thy husband freed by me. Thou wilt be able to take him back free from disease. And he will attain to success. And along with thee, he will attain a life of 400 years. And celebrating sacrifices with due rites, he will achieve great fame in this world. And upon thee Sadyavan will also beget a century of sons. And these Kshatriyas with their sons and grandsons will all be kings, and will always be famous in connection with thy name. And thy father also will beget 100 sons on thy mother Malavi. And under the name of the Malavas, thy Kshatriya brothers, resembling the celestials, will be widely known along with their sons and daughters. And having bestowed these boons on Savitri, and having thus made her desist, Yama departed for his abode. Savitri, after Yama had gone away, went back to the spot where her husband's ash-colored corpse lay, and seeing her lord on the ground, she approached him, and taking hold of him, she placed his head on her lap and herself sat down on the ground. Then Satyavan regained his consciousness, and affectionately eyeing Savitri again and again, like one come home after a sojourn in a strange land, he addressed her thus, Alas, I have slept long. Wherefore didst thou not awake me? And where is that same sable person that was dragging me away? At these words of his, Savitri said, Thou hast, O bull among men, slept long on my lap. That restrainer of creatures, the worshipful Yama, had gone away. Thou art refreshed, O blessed one, and sleep hath forsaken thee, O son of a king. If thou art able, rise thou up. Behold, the night is deep. Markandeya continued, having regained consciousness, Satyavan rose up like one who had enjoyed a sweet sleep, and seeing every side covered with woods, said, O girl of slender waist, I came with thee for procuring fruits. Then while I was cutting wood I felt a pain in my head. And on account of that intense pain about my head I was unable to stand for any length of time, and, therefore, I lay on thy lap and slept. All this, O auspicious lady, I remember. Then, as thou didst embrace me, sleep stole away my senses. I then saw that it was dark all around. In the midst of it I saw a person of exceeding effulgence. If thou knowest everything, do thou then, O girl of slender waist, tell me whether what I saw was only a dream or a reality. Thereupon, Savitri addressed him, saying, The night deepens. I shall, O prince, relate everything unto thee on the morrow. Arise, arise, may good betide thee. And, O thou of excellent vows, come and behold thy parents. The sun hath set a long while ago, and the night deepens. Those rangers of the night, having frightful voices, are walking about in glee. And sounds are heard, proceeding from the denizens of the forest treading through the woods. These terrible shrieks of jackals that are issuing from the south and the east make my heart tremble, in fear. Satyavan then said, Covered with deep darkness, the wilderness hath worn a dreadful aspect. Thou wilt, therefore, not be able to discern the tract, and consequently wilt not be able to go. Then Savitri replied, In consequence of a conflagration having taken place in the forest today, a withered tree standeth aflame, and the flames being stirred by the wind are discerned now and then. I shall fetch some fire and light these faggots around. Do thou dispel all anxiety. I will do all this, if thou darest not go, for I find thee unwell. Nor wilt thou be able to discover the way through this forest enveloped in darkness. Tomorrow, when the woods become visible, we will go hence, if thou please. If, O sinless one, it is thy wish, we shall pass this night even here. At these words of hers, Satyavan replied, The pain in my head is off, and I feel well in my limbs. With thy favor I wish to behold my father and mother. Never before did I return to the hermitage after the proper time had passed away. Even before it is twilight my mother confineth me within the asylum. Even when I come out during the day, my parents become anxious on my account, and my father searcheth for me, together with all the inhabitants of the sylvan asylums. Before this, moved by deep grief, my father and mother had rebuked me many times and often, saying, Thou comest having tarried long. I am thinking of the past they have today come to on my account, for, surely, great grief will be theirs when they miss me. One night before this, the old couple, who loved me dearly, wept from deep sorrow and said unto me, Deprived of thee, O son, we cannot live for even a moment. As long as thou livest, so long, surely, we also will live. Thou art the crutch of these blind ones, on thee doth perpetuity of our race depend. On thee also depend our funeral cake, our fame, and our descendants. My mother is old, and my father also is so. I am surely their crutch. If they see me not in the night, What, oh, will be their plight? I hate that slumber of mine for the sake of which my unoffending mother and my father have both been in trouble, and I myself also am placed in such rending distress. Without my father and mother, I cannot bear to live. It is certain that by this time my blind father, his mind disconsolate with grief, is asking every one of the inhabitants of the hermitage about me. I do not, O fair girl, grieve so much for myself as I do for my sire, and for my weak mother ever obedient to her lord. Surely, they will be afflicted with extreme anguish on account of me. I hold my life so long as they live. And I know that they should be maintained by me, and that I should do only what is agreeable to them. Markandeya continued, having said this, that virtuous youth who loved and revered his parents, afflicted with grief, held up his arms and began to lament in accents of woe. And seeing her lord overwhelmed with sorrow, the virtuous Savitri wiped away the tears from his eyes and said, If I have observed austerities, and have given away in charity, and have performed sacrifice, may this night be for the good of my father-in-law, mother-in-law, and husband. I do not remember having told a single falsehood, even in jest. Let my father-in-law and mother-in-law hold their lives by virtue of the truth. Satyavan said, I long for the sight of my father and mother. Therefore, O Savitri, proceed without delay. O beautiful damsel, I swear by my own self that if I find any evil to have befallen my father and mother, I will not live. If thou hast any regard for virtue, if thou wishest me to live, if it is thy duty to do what is agreeable to me, proceed thou to the hermitage. The beautiful Savitri then rose and, tying up her hair, raised her husband in her arms. And Satyavan, having risen, rubbed his limbs with his hands. And as he surveyed all around, his eyes fell upon his wallet. Then Savitri said unto him, Tomorrow thou mayst gather fruits, and I shall carry thy axe for thy ease. Then hanging up the wallet upon the bough of a tree, and taking up the axe, she reapproached her husband. And that lady of beautiful thighs, placing her husband's left arm upon her left shoulder, and embracing him with her right arms, proceeded with elephantic gait. Then Satyavan said, O timid one, by virtue of habit, the forest paths are known to me. And further, by the light of the moon between the trees, I can see them. We have now reached the same path that we took in the morning for gathering fruits. Do thou, O auspicious one, proceed by the way that we had come. Thou needst not any longer feel dubious about our path. Near that tract overgrown with palasa tree, the way diverges into two. Do thou proceed along the path that lies to the north of it. I am now well and have got back my strength. I long to see my father and mother. Saying this, Satyavan hastily proceeded towards the hermitage. Mahabharata, Book 3, Section 296. Markandeya said, Meanwhile the mighty Dayumatsana, having regained his sight, could see everything. And when his vision grew clear, he saw everything around him. And, O bull of the Bharata race, proceeding with his wife Saivya to all the neighboring asylums in search of his son, he became extremely distressed on his account. And that night the old couple went about searching in asylums, and rivers, and woods, and floods. And whenever they heard any sound, they stood raising their heads, anxiously thinking that their son was coming, and said, O yonder cometh Satyavan with Savitri. And they rushed hither and thither like maniacs, their feet torn, cracked, wounded, and bleeding, pierced with thorns and kusa blades. Then all the Brahmanas dwelling in that hermitage came unto them, and surrounding them on all sides, comforted them, and brought them back to their own asylum. And their Dayumatsana with his wife, surrounded by aged ascetics, was entertained with stories of monarchs of former times. And although that old couple, desirous of seeing their son, was comforted, yet recollecting the youthful days of their son, they became exceedingly sorry. And afflicted with grief, they began to lament in piteous accents, saying, Alas, O son, alas, O chaste daughter-in-law, where are you? Then a truthful Brahmana of the name of Suvrachas spake unto them, saying, Considering the austerities, self-restraint, and behavior of his wife Savitri, there can be no doubt that Satyavan liveth. And Gautama said, I have studied all the Vedas with their branches, and I have acquired great ascetic merit. And I have led a celibate existence, practicing also the Brahmacharya mode of life. I have gratified Agni and my superiors. With rapt soul I have also observed all the vows, and I have according to the ordinance frequently lived upon air alone. By virtue of this ascetic merit, I am cognizant of all the doings of others. Therefore, do thou take it for certain that Satyavan liveth. Thereupon his disciple said, The words that have fallen from the lips of my preceptor can never be false. Therefore, Satyavan surely liveth. And the Rishi said, Considering the auspicious marks that his wife Savitri beareth, and all of which indicate immunity from widowhood, there can be no doubt that Satyavan liveth. And Bharadwaja said, Having regard to the ascetic merit, self-restraint, and conduct of his wife Savitri, there can be no doubt that Satyavan liveth. And Dalbhya said, Since thou hast regained thy sight, and since Savitri hath gone away after completion of the vow, without taking any food, there can be no doubt that Satyavan liveth. And Apastamba said, From the manner in which the voices of birds and wild animals are being heard through the stillness of the atmosphere on all sides, and from the fact also of thy having regained the use of thy eyes, indicating thy usefulness for earthly purposes once more, there can be no doubt that Satyavan liveth. And Dalma said, As thy son is graced with every virtue, and as he is the beloved of all, and as he is possessed of marks betokening a long life, there can be no doubt that Satyavan liveth. Markandeya continued, Thus cheered by those ascetics of truthful speech, Dayumatsana, pondering over those points, attained a little ease. A little while after, Savitri with her husband Satyavan reached the hermitage during the night and entered it with a glad heart. The Brahmanas then said, Beholding this meeting with thy son, and thy restoration to eyesight, we all wish thee well, O Lord of earth. Thy meeting with thy son, the sight of thy daughter-in-law, and thy restoration to sight constitute a threefold prosperity which thou hast gained. What we all have said must come to pass, there can be no doubt of this. Henceforth thou shalt rapidly grow in prosperity. Then, O Pritha's son, the twice-born ones lighted a fire and sat themselves down before King Dayumatsana. And Saivya, and Satyavan, and Savitri, who stood apart, their hearts free from grief, sat down with the permission of them all. Then, O Partha, seated with the monarch those dwellers of the woods, actuated by curiosity, asked the king's son, saying, Why didst thou not, O illustrious one, come back earlier with thy wife? Why hast thou come so late in the night? What obstacle prevented thee? We do not know, O son of a king, why thou hast caused such alarm to us, and to thy father and mother. It behoveth thee to tell us all about this. Thereupon, Satyavan said, With the permission of my father, I went to the woods with Savitri. There, as I was hewing wood in the forest, I felt a pain in my head. And in consequence of the pain, I fell into a deep sleep. This is all that I remember. I had never slept so long before. I have come so late at night, in order that ye might not grieve on my account. There is no other reason for this. Gautama then said, Thou knowest not then the cause of thy father's sudden restoration to sight. It, therefore, behoveth Savitri to relate it. I wish to hear it from thee, for surely thou art conversant with the mysteries of good and evil. And, O Savitri, I know thee to be like the goddess Savitri herself in splendor. Thou must know the cause of this. Therefore, do thou relate it truly. If it should not be kept a secret, do thou unfold it unto us. At these words of Gautama, Savitri said, It is as ye surmise. Your desire shall surely not be unfulfilled. I have no secret to keep. Listen to the truth then. The high-souled Narada had predicted the death of my husband. Today was the appointed time. I could not, therefore, bear to be separated from my husband's company. And after he had fallen asleep, Yama, accompanied by his messengers, presented himself before him, and tying him, began to take him away towards the region inhabited by the Pitris. Thereupon I began to praise that august God, with truthful words. And he granted me 5 boons, of which do ye hear from me. For my father-in-law I have obtained these 2 boons, viz., his restoration to sight as also to his kingdom. My father also hath obtained 100 sons. And I myself have obtained 100 sons. And my husband Satyavan hath obtained a life of 400 years. It was for the sake of my husband's life that I had observed that vow. Thus have I narrated unto you in detail the cause by which this mighty misfortune of mine was afterwards turned into happiness. The rishis said, O chaste lady of excellent disposition, observant of vows and endued with virtue, and sprung from an illustrious line, by thee hath the race of this foremost of kings, which was overwhelmed with calamities, and was sinking in an ocean of darkness, been rescued. Markandeya continued, then having applauded and reverenced that best of women, those rishis there assembled bade farewell to that foremost of kings as well as to his son. And having saluted them thus, they speedily went, in peace with cheerful hearts, to their respective abodes. Mahabharata, Book 3, Section 297. Markandeya continued, when the night had passed away, and the solar orb had risen, those ascetics, having performed their morning rites, assembled together. And although those mighty sages again and again spake unto Dayumatsana of the high fortune of Savitri, yet they were never satisfied. And it so happened, O king, that there came to that hermitage a large body of people from Sulwa. And they brought tidings of the enemy of Dayumatsana having been slain by his own minister. And they related unto him all that had happened, viz., how having heard that the usurper had been slain with all his friends and allies by his minister, his troops had all fled, and how all the subjects had become unanimous on behalf of their legitimate king, saying, whether possessed of sight or not, even he shall be our king. And they said, we have been sent to thee in consequence of that resolve. This car of thine, and this army also consisting of 4 kinds of forces, have arrived for thee. Good betide thee, O king. Do thou come. Thou hast been proclaimed in the city. Do thou forever occupy the station belonging to thy lather and grandfather. And beholding the king possessed of sight and able-bodied, they bowed down their heads, their eyes expanded with wonder. Then having worshipped those old and brahmanas dwelling in the hermitage and honored by them in return, the king set out for his city. And surrounded by the soldiers, Saivya, also accompanied by Savitri, went in a vehicle furnished with shining sheets and borne on the shoulders of men. Then the priests with joyful hearts installed Dayumatsana on the throne with his high-souled son as prince regent. And after the lapse of a long time, Savitri gave birth to a century of sons, all warlike and unretreating from battle, and enhancing the fame of Sulwa's race. And she also had a century of highly powerful uterine brothers born unto Aswapati, the lord of the Madras, by Malavi. Thus, O son of Pritha, did Savitri raise from pitiable plight to high fortune, herself, and her father and mother, her father-in-law and mother-in-law, as also the race of her husband. And like that gentle lady Savitri, the auspicious daughter of Drupada, endued with excellent character, will rescue you all. Vyasa said, thus exhorted by that high-souled sage, the son of Pandu, O king, with his mind free from anxiety, continued to live in the forest of Kamayaka. The man that listeneth with reverence to the excellent story of Savitri attaineth to happiness and success in everything, and never meeteth with misery. Mahabharata, Book 3, Section 298. Janamejaya said, what, O Brahmana, was that great fear entertained by Yudhishthira in respect of Karna, for which Lomesa had conveyed to the son of Pandu a message of deep import from Indra in these words, that intense fear of thine which thou dost never express to any one, I will remove after the Nanjaya goeth from hence? And, O best of ascetics, why was it that the virtuous Yudhishthira never expressed it to anyone? Vyasa said, as thou askest me, O tiger among kings, I will relate that history unto thee. Do thou listen to my words, O best of the Bharatas. After 12 years of their exile had passed away and the 13th year had set in, Sakra, ever friendly to the sons of Pandu, resolved to beg of Karna his earrings. And, O mighty monarch, ascertaining this intention of the great chief of the celestials about Karna's earrings, Surya, having effulgence for his wealth, went unto Karna. And, O foremost of kings, while that hero devoted to the Brahmanas and truthful in speech was lying down at night at his ease on a rich bed overlaid with a costly sheet, the effulgent deity, filled with kindness and affection for his son, showed himself, O Bharata, unto him in his dreams. And assuming from ascetic power the form of a handsome Brahmana versed in the Vedas, Surya sweetly said unto Karna these words for his benefit, O son, do thou, O Karna, listen to these words of mine, O thou foremost of truthful persons. O mighty armed one, I tell thee today from affection, what is for thy great good. With the object, O Karna, of obtaining thy earrings, Sakra, moved by the desire of benefiting the sons of Pandu, will come unto thee, disguised as a Brahmana. He, as well as all the world, knoweth thy character, viz., that when solicited by pious people, thou givest away but never takest in gift. Thou, O son, givest unto Brahmanas wealth or any other thing that is asked of thee, and never refusest anything to anybody. Knowing thee to be such, the subduer himself of Paka will come to beg of thee thy earrings and coat of mail. When he beggeth the earrings of thee, it behoveth thee not to give them away, but to gratify him with sweet speeches to the best of thy power. Even this is for thy supreme good. While asking thee for the earrings, thou shalt, with various reasons, repeatedly refuse Purandara, who is desirous of obtaining them, offering him, instead, various other kinds of wealth, such as gems and women and kine, and citing various precedents. If thou, O Kama, givest away thy beautiful earrings born with thee, thy life being shortened, thou wilt meet with death. Arrayed in thy mail and earrings, thou wilt, O bestower of honors, be incapable of being slain by foes in battle. Do thou lay to heart these words of mine. Both these jeweled ornaments have sprung from Amrita. Therefore, they should be preserved by thee, if thy life is at all dear to thee. Hearing these words, Kama said, Who art thou that tellest me so, showing me such kindness? If it pleaseth thee, tell me, O illustrious one, who thou art in the guise of a Brahmana. The Brahmana thereupon said, O son, I am he of 1,000 rays. Out of affection, I point out to thee the path. Act thou according to my words, as it is for thy great good to do so. Kama replied, Surely, this itself is highly fortunate for me that the God himself of splendor addresses me today, seeking my welfare. Listen, however, to these words of mine. May it please thee, O bestower of boons, it is only from affection that I tell thee this. If I am dear to thee, I should not be dissuaded from the observance of my vow. O thou that art possessed of the wealth of effulgence, the whole world knoweth this to be my vow that, of a verity, I am prepared to give away life itself unto superior Brahmanas. If, O best of all rangers of the sky, Sakra cometh to me, disguised as a Brahmana, to beg for the benefit of the sons of Pandu, I will, O chief of the celestials, give him the earrings and the excellent mail, so that my fame which hath spread over the 3 worlds may not suffer any diminution. For persons like us, it is not fit to save life by a blameworthy act. On the contrary, it is even proper for us to meet death with the approbation of the world and under circumstances bringing fame. Therefore, will I bestow upon Indra the earrings with my coat of mail. If the slayer himself of Vala and Vritra cometh to ask for the earrings for the benefit of the sons of Pandu, that will conduce to my fame, leading at the same time to his infamy. O thou possessed of splendor, I wish for fame in this world, even if it is to be purchased with life itself, for they that have fame enjoy the celestial regions, while they that are destitute of it are lost. Fame keepeth people alive in this world even like a mother, while infamy killeth men even though they may move about with bodies undestroyed. O Lord of the worlds, O thou possessed of the wealth of effulgence, that fame is the life of men is evidenced by an ancient sloka sung by the Creator himself. In the next world it is fame that is the chief support of a person, while in this world pure fame lengthens life. Therefore, by giving away my earrings and mail with both of which I was born I will win eternal fame. And by duly giving away the same to Brahmanas according to the ordinance, by offering up my body, as a gift to the gods, and the sacrifice of war, by achieving feats difficult of performance, and by conquering my foes in fight, I will acquire nothing but renown. And by dispelling on the field of battle the fears of the affrighted that may beg for their lives, and relieving old men and boys and Brahmanas from terror and anxiety, I will win excellent fame and the highest heaven. My fame is to be protected with the sacrifice of even my life. Even this, know thou, is my vow. By giving away such a valuable gift to Maghavan disguised as a Brahmana, I will, O God, acquire in this world the most exalted state. Mahabharata, Book 3, Section 299. Surya said, Never do, O Karna, anything that is harmful to thyself and thy friends, thy sons, thy wives, thy father, and thy mother, O thou best of those that bear life, people desire renown in this world and lasting fame in heaven without wishing to sacrifice their bodies. But as thou desirest undying fame at the expense of thy life, she will, without doubt, snatch away thy life. O bull among men, in this world, the father, the mother, the son, and other relatives are of use only to him that is alive. O tiger among men, as regard kings, it is only when they are alive that prowess can be of any use to them. Do thou understand this? O thou of exceeding splendor, fame is for the good of these only that are alive. Of what use is fame to the dead whose bodies have been reduced to ashes? One that is dead cannot enjoy renown. It is only when one is alive that one can enjoy it. The fame of one that is dead is like a garland of flowers around the neck of a corpse. As thou reverest me, I tell thee this for thy benefit, because thou art a worshipper of mine. They that worship me are always protected by me. That also is another reason for my addressing thee thus. Thinking again, O mighty armed one, that this one revereth me with great reverence, I have been inspired with love for thee. Do thou, therefore, act according to my words. There is, besides, some profound mystery in all this, ordained by fate. It is for this that I tell thee so. Do thou act without mistrust of any kind. O bull among men, it is not fit for thee to know this which is a secret to the very gods. Therefore, I do not reveal that secret unto thee. Thou wilt, however, understand it in time. I repeat what I have already said. Do thou, O Ratha's son, lay my words to heart. When the wielder of the thunderbolt asketh thee for them, do thou never give him thy earrings. O thou of exceeding splendor, with thy handsome earrings, thou lookest beautiful, even like the moon himself in the clear firmament, between the Visakha constellation. Dost thou know that fame availeth only the person that is living? Therefore, when the Lord of the Celestials will ask the earrings, thou shouldst, O son, refuse him. Repeating again and again answers fraught with various reasons, thou wilt, O sinless one, be able to remove the eagerness of the Lord of the Celestial for the possession of the earrings. Do thou, O Karna, after Purandar's purpose by urging answers fraught with reason and grave import and adorned with sweetness and suavity. Thou dost always, O tiger among men, challenge him that can draw the bow with his left hand, and heroic Arjuna also will surely encounter thee in fight. But when furnished with thy earrings, Arjuna will never be able to vanquish thee in fight even if Indra himself comes to his assistance. Therefore, O Karna, if thou wishest to vanquish Arjuna in battle, these handsome earrings of thine should never be parted with to Sakra. Mahabharata, Book 3, Section 300. Karna said, As thou, O Lord of splendor, knowest me for thy worshipper, so also thou knowest that there is nothing which I cannot give away in charity, O thou of fiery rays. Neither my wives, nor my sons, nor my own self, nor my friends, are so dear to me as thou, on account of the veneration I feel for thee, O Lord of splendor. Thou knowest, O Maker of light, that high-souled persons bear a loving regard for their dear worshippers. Karna revereth me and is dear to me. He knoweth no other deity in heaven. Thinking this thou hast, O Lord, said unto me what is for my benefit. Yet, O thou of bright rays, again do I beseech thee with bended head, again do I place myself in thy hands. I will repeat the answer I have already given. It behoveth thee to forgive me. Death itself is not fraught with such terrors for me as untruth. As regards especially the Brahmanas, again, I do not hesitate to yield up my life even for them. And, O Divine One, respecting what thou hast said unto me of Fulgana, the son of Pandu, let thy grief born of thy anxiety of heart, O Lord of splendor, be dispelled touching him and myself, for I shall surely conquer Arjuna in battle. Thou knowest, O deity, that I have great strength of weapons obtained from Jamadagnya and the high-souled Drona. Permit me now, O foremost of celestials, to observe my vow, so that unto him of the thunderbolt coming to beg of me, I may give away even my life. Surya said, If, O son, thou givest away thy earrings to the wielder of the thunderbolt, O thou of mighty strength, thou shouldst also, for the purpose of securing victory, speak unto him, saying, O thou of 100 sacrifices, I shall give the earrings under a condition. Furnished with the earrings, thou art certainly incapable of being slain by any being. Therefore it is, O son, that desirous of beholding thee slain in battle by Arjuna, the destroyer of the Dandavas desireth to deprive thee of thy earrings. Repeatedly adoring with truthful words that Lord of the Celestials, viz., Purandara, armed with weapons incapable of being frustrated, do thou also beseech him, saying, Give me an infallible dart capable of slaying all foes, and I will, O thousand-eyed deity, give the earrings with the excellent coat of mail. On this condition shouldst thou give the earrings unto Sakra. With that dart, O Karna, thou wilt slay foes in battle, for, O mighty armed one, that dart of the chief of the Celestials doth not return to the hand that hurleth it, without slaying enemies by hundreds and by thousands. Vyasa continued, having said this, the thousand-rayed deity suddenly vanished away. The next day, after having told his prayers, Karna related his dream unto the sun. And Vrisha related unto him the vision he had seen, and all that had passed between them in the night. Thereupon, having heard everything, that enemy of Swarbanu, that Lord, the resplendent and divine Surya, said unto him with a smile, It is even so. Then Ratha's son, that slayer of hostile heroes, knowing all about the matter, and desirous of obtaining the dart, remained in expectation of Vasva. Mahabharata, Book 3, Section 301. Janamejaya said, What was that secret which was not revealed to Karna by the deity of warm rays? Of what kind also were those earrings, and of what sort was that coat of mail? Whence, too, was that mail in those earrings? All this, O best of men, I wish to hear. O thou possessed of the wealth of asceticism, do tell me all this. Vyasa said, I will, O monarch, tell thee that secret which was not revealed by the deity possessed of the wealth of effulgence. I will also describe unto thee those earrings and that coat of mail. Once on a time, O king, there appeared before Kuntabhoja a Brahmana of fierce energy and tall stature, bearing a beard and matted locks, and carrying a staff in his hand. And he was agreeable to the eye and of faultless limbs, and seemed to blaze forth in splendor. And he was possessed of a yellow-blue complexion like that of honey. And his speech was mellifluous, and he was adorned with ascetic merit and a knowledge of the Vedas. And that person of great ascetic merit, addressing King Kuntabhoja, said, O thou that are free from pride, I wish to live as a guest in thy house, feeding on the food obtained as alms from thee. Neither thy followers, nor thou thyself, shall ever act in such a way as to produce my displeasure. If, O sinless one, it liketh thee, I would then live in thy house thus. I shall leave thy abode when I wish, and come back when I please. And, O king, no one shall offend me in respect of my food or bed. Then Kuntabhoja spake unto him these words cheerfully, Be it so, and more. And he again said unto him, O thou of great wisdom, I have an illustrious daughter named Pritha. And she beareth an excellent character, is observant of vow, chaste, and of subdued senses. And she shall attend on thee and minister unto thee with reverence. And thou wilt be pleased with her disposition. And having said this to that Brahmana and duly paid him homage, the king went to his daughter Pritha of large eyes, and spake thus unto her, O child, this eminently pious Brahmana is desirous of dwelling in my house. I have accepted his proposal, saying, So be it, relying, O child, on thy aptitude and skill in ministering unto Brahmanas. It, therefore, behoveth thee to act in such a manner that my words may not be untrue. Do thou give him with alacrity whatever this reverend Brahmana, possessed of ascetic merit and engaged in the study of the Vedas, may want. Let everything that this Brahmana asketh for be given to him cheerfully. A Brahmana is the embodiment of preeminent energy, he is also the embodiment of the highest ascetic merit. It is in consequence of the virtuous practices of Brahmanas that the sun shineth in the heavens. It was for their disregard of Brahmanas that were deserving of honor that the mighty Asura Vatapi, as also Talajanga, was destroyed by the curse of the Brahmanas. For the present, O child, it is a highly virtuous one of that order that is entrusted to thy keep. Thou shouldst always tend this Brahmana with concentrated mind. O daughter, I know that, from childhood upwards, thou hast ever been attentive to Brahmanas, and superiors, and relatives, and servants, and friends, to thy mothers and myself. I know thou bearest thyself well, bestowing proper regard upon everyone. And, O thou of faultless limbs, in the city of the interior of my palace, on account of thy gentle behavior, there is not one, even among the servants, that is dissatisfied with thee. I have, therefore, thought thee fit to wait upon all Brahmanas of wrathful temper. Thou art, O Pritha, a girl and has been adopted as my daughter. Thou art born in the race of the Vrishnis, and art the favorite daughter of Sura. Thou wert, O girl, given to me gladly by thy father himself. The sister of Vasudeva by birth, thou art, by adoption, the foremost of my children. Having promised me in these words, I will give my firstborn, thy father gladly gave thee to me while thou wert yet in thy infancy. It is for this reason that thou art my daughter. Born in such a race and reared in such a race, thou hast come from one happy state to another like a lotus transferred from one lake to another. O auspicious girl, women, especially they that are of mean extraction, although they may with difficulty be kept under restraint, become in consequence of their unripe age, generally deformed in character. But thou, O Pritha, art born in a royal race, and thy beauty also is extraordinary. And then, O girl, thou art endued with every accomplishment. Do thou, therefore, O damsel, renouncing pride and haughtiness and a sense of self-importance, wait upon and worship the boon-giving Brahmana, and thereby attain, O Pritha, to an auspicious state. By acting thus, O auspicious and sinless girl, thou wilt surely attain to auspiciousness. But if on the contrary, thou stirrest up the anger of this best of the twice-born ones, my entire race will be consumed by him. Mahabharata, Book 3, Section 302. Kunti said, according to thy promise, I will, O king, with concentrated mind, serve that Brahmana. O foremost of kings, I do not say this falsely. It is my nature to worship Brahmanas. And, as in the present case, my doing so would be agreeable to thee, even this would be highly conducive to my welfare. Whether that worshipful one cometh in the evening, or in morning, or at night, or even at midnight, he will have no reason to be angry with me. O foremost of kings, to do good by serving the twice-born ones, observing all thy commands, is what I consider to be highly profitable to me, O best of men. Do thou, therefore, O foremost of monarchs, rely on me. That best of Brahmanas, while residing in thy house, shall never have cause for dissatisfaction. I tell thee truly. I shall, O king, be always attentive to that which is agreeable to this Brahmana, and what is fraught also with good to thee. O sinless one! I know full well that Brahmanas that are eminently virtuous, when propitiated bestow salvation, and when displeased, are capable of bringing about destruction upon the offender. Therefore, I shall please this foremost of Brahmanas. Thou wilt not, O monarch, come to any grief from that best of regenerate persons, owing to any act of mine. In consequence of the transgressions of monarchs, Brahmanas, O foremost of kings, became the cause of evil to them, as Chayavana had become, in consequence of the act of Sukanya. I will, therefore, O king, with great regularity, wait upon that best of Brahmanas according to thy instructions in that respect. And when she had thus spoken at length, the king embraced and cheered her, and instructed her in detail as to what should be done by her. And the king said, Thou shalt, O gentle maid, act even thus, without fear, for my good is also thy own, and for the good of thy race also, O thou of faultless limbs. And having said this, the illustrious Kuntabhoja, who was devoted to the Brahmanas, made over the girl Pritha to that Brahmana, saying, This my daughter, O Brahmana, is of tender age and brought up in luxury. If, therefore, she transgresses at any time, do thou not take that to heart. Illustrious Brahmanas are never angry with old men, children, and ascetics, even if these transgress frequently. In respect of even a great wrong, forgiveness is due from the regenerate. The worship, therefore, O best of Brahmanas, that is offered to the best of one's power and exertion, should be acceptable. Hearing these words of the monarch, the Brahmana said, So be it. Thereupon, the king became highly pleased and assigned unto him apartments that were white as swans or the beams of the moon. And in the room intended for the sacrificial fire, the king placed a brilliant seat especially constructed for him. And the food and other things that were offered unto the Brahmana were of the same excellent kind. And casting aside idleness and all sense of self-importance, the princess addressed herself with right good will to wait upon the Brahmana. And the chaste Kunti, endued with purity of conduct, went thither for serving the Brahmana. And duly waiting upon that Brahmana as if he were a very god, she gratified him highly. Mahabharata, Book 3, Section 303. Vyasa said, and that maiden of rigid vows. O mighty monarch, by serving with a pure heart, that Brahmana of rigid vows succeeded in gratifying him. And, O foremost of kings, saying, I will come back in the morning, that best of Brahmanas sometimes came in the evening or in night. Him, however, the maiden worshipped at all hours with sumptuous food and drink in bed. And as day after day passed away, her attentions to him, in respect of food and seat and bed, increased instead of undergoing any diminution. And, O king, even when the Brahmana reproved her, finding fault with any of her arrangements, or addressed her in harsh words, Pritha did not do anything that was disagreeable to him. And on many occasions the Brahmana came back after the appointed hour had long passed away. And on many occasions, such as the depth of night, when food was hard to procure, he said, Give me food. But on all those occasions saying, All is ready, Pritha held before him the fare. And even like a disciple, daughter, or a sister, that blameless gem of a girl with a devoted heart, O king, gratified that foremost of Brahmanas. And that best of Brahmanas became well pleased with her conduct and ministrations. And he received those attentions of hers, valuing them rightly. And, O Bharata, her father asked her every morning and evening, saying, O daughter, is the Brahmana satisfied with thy ministrations? And that illustrious maiden used to reply, Exceedingly well. And thereupon, the high-souled Kuntabhoja experienced the greatest delight. And when after a full year that best of ascetics was unable to find any fault whatever in Pritha, who was engaged in ministering unto him, well pleased he said unto her, O gentle maid, I have been well pleased with thy attentions, O beautiful girl. Do thou, O blessed girl, ask even for such boons as are difficult of being obtained by men in this world, and obtaining which, thou mayst surpass in fame all the women in this world. At these words of his, Kunti said, Everything hath already been done in my behalf, since thou, O chief of those that are versed in the Vedas, and my father also, have been pleased with me. As regards the boons, I consider them as already obtained by me, O Brahmana. The Brahmana thereupon said, If, O gentle maid, thou dost not, O thou of sweet smiles, wish to obtain boons from me, do thou then take this mantra from me for invoking the celestials. Any one amongst the celestials whom thou mayst invoke by uttering this mantra will appear before thee and be under thy power. Willing or not, by virtue of this mantra, that deity in gentle guise, and assuming the obedient attitude of slave, will become subject to thy power. Vyasa continued, thus addressed, that faultless maiden could not, O king, from fear of a curse, refuse toward the second time compliance with the wishes of that best of the twice-born ones. Then, O king, that Brahmana imparted unto that girl of faultless limbs those mantras which are recited in the beginning of the Atharvana Veda. And, O king, having imparted unto her those mantras, he said unto Kuntabhoja, I have, O monarch, dwelt happily in thy house, always worshipped with due regard and gratified by thy daughter. I shall now depart. And saying this, he vanished there and then. And beholding that Brahmana vanished there and then, the king was struck with amazement. And the monarch then treated his daughter Pritha with proper regard. Mahabharata, Book 3, Section 304. Vyasa said, when that foremost of Brahmanas had gone away on some other errand, the maiden began to ponder over the virtue of those mantras. And she said to herself, Of what nature are those mantras that have been bestowed on me by that high-souled one? I shall without delay test their power. And as she was thinking in this way, she suddenly perceived indications of the approach of her season. And her season having arrived, while she was yet unmarried, she blushed in shame. And it came to pass that as she was seated in her chamber on a rich bed, she beheld the solar orb rising in the east. And both the mind and the eyes of that maiden of excellent waist became rivet fast upon the solar orb. And she gazed and gazed on that orb without being satiated with the beauty of the morning sun. And she suddenly became gifted with celestial sight. And then she beheld that god of divine form accoutred in mail and adorned with earrings. And at sight of the god, O Lord of men, she became curious as to the potency of the mantras. And thereupon that maiden resolved to invoke him. And having recourse to pranayama, she invoked the maker of day. And thus invoked by her, O king, the maker of day speedily presented himself. And he was of a yellowish hue like honey, and was possessed of mighty arms, and his neck was marked with lines like those of a conch shell. And furnished with armlets, and decked with a diadem, he came smiling, and illumining all the directions. And it was by yoga power that he divided himself in twain, one of which continued to give heat, and the other appeared before Kunti. And he addressed Kunti in words that were exceedingly sweet, saying, O gentle maiden, overpowered by the mantras, I come hither obedient to thee. Subject as I am to thy power, what shall I do, O queen? Tell me, for I shall do whatever thou mayst command. Hearing these words of the deity, Kunti said, O worshipful one, go thou back to the place thou hast come from. I invoke thee from curiosity alone. Pardon me, O worshipful one. Surya then said, O damsel of slender waist, I will, even as thou hast said, return to the place I have come from. Having called a celestial, it is not, however, proper to send him away in vain. Thy intention, O blessed one, it is to have from Surya a son furnished with a coat of mail and earrings, and who in point of prowess would be beyond compare in this world. Do thou, therefore, O damsel of elephantine gait, surrender thy person to me. Thou shalt then have, O lady, a son after thy wish. O gentle girl, O thou of sweet smiles, I will go back after having known thee. If thou do not gratify me today by obeying my word, I shall in anger curse thee, thy father and that Brahmana also. For thy fault, I will surely consume them all, and I shall inflict condign punishment on that foolish father of thine that knoweth not this transgression of thine, and on that Brahmana who hath bestowed the mantras on thee without knowing thy disposition and character. Yonder are all the celestials in heaven, with Purandara at their head, who are looking at me with derisive smiles at my being deceived by thee, O lady. Look at those celestials, for thou art now possessed of celestial sight. Before this I have endued thee with celestial vision, in consequence of which thou couldst see me. Vyasa continued, Thereupon the princess beheld the celestials standing in the firmament, each in his proper sphere, even as she saw before her that highly resplendent deity furnished with rays, viz., Surya himself. And beholding them all, the girl became frightened and her face was suffused with blushes of shame. And then she addressed Surya, saying, O Lord of rays, go thou back to thy own region. On account of my maidenhood, this outrage of thine is fraught with woe to me. It is only one's father, mother, and other superiors that are capable of giving away their daughter's body. Virtue I shall never sacrifice, seeing that in this world the keeping of their persons inviolate is deemed as the highest duty of women, and is held in high regard. O thou possessed of wealth of splendor, it is only to test the power of my mantras that I have, from mere childishness, summoned thee. Considering that this hath been done by a girl of tender years, it behoveth thee, O Lord, to forgive her. Then Surya said, It is because I consider thee a girl that, O Kunti, I am speaking to thee so mildly. To one that is not so I would not concede this. Do thou, O Kunti, surrender thyself. Thou shalt surely attain happiness thereby. Since, O timid maiden, thou hast invoked me with mantras, it is not proper for me to go away without any purpose being attained, for, if I do so I shall then. O thou of faultless limbs, be the object of laughter in the world, and, O beauteous damsel, a byword with all the celestials. Do thou, therefore, yield to me. By that thou shalt obtain a son even like myself, and thou shalt also be much praised in all the world. Footnotes 593:1 in the original, Vimanam, i.e., Akar. Mahabharata, Book 3, Section 305. Vyasa said, although that noble girl addressed him in various sweet words, yet she was unable to dissuade that deity of 1,000 rays. And when she failed to dissuade the dispeller of darkness, at last from fear of a curse, she reflected, O king, for a long time, how may my innocent father, and that Brahmana also, escape the angry Surya's curse for my sake? Although energy and asceticism are capable of destroying sins, yet even honest persons, if they be of unripe age, should not foolishly court them. By foolishly acting in that way, I have today been placed in a frightful situation. Indeed, I have been placed entirely within the grasp of this deity. Yea, how can I do what is sinful by taking it on myself to surrender my person to him? Vyasa continued, afflicted with fear of a curse, and thinking much within herself, an utter stupefaction of the senses came upon her. And she was so confounded that she could not settle what to do. Afraid, on the one hand, O king, of the reproach of friends if she obeyed the deity, and, on the other, of his curse if she disobeyed him, the damsel at last, O foremost of kings, said these words unto that god, in accents tremulous with bashfulness: O God, as my father and mother and friends are still living, this violation of duty on my part should not take place. If, O God, I commit this unlawful act with thee, the reputation of this race shall be sacrificed in this world on my account. If thou, however, O thou foremost of those that impart heat, deem this to be a meritorious act, I shall then fulfill thy desire, even though my relatives may not have bestowed me on thee. May I remain chaste after having surrendered my person to thee. Surely, the virtue, the reputation, the fame, and the life of every creature are established in thee. Hearing these words of hers, Surya replied, O thou of sweet smiles, neither thy father, nor thy mother, nor any other superior of thine, is competent to give thee away. May good betide thee, O beauteous damsel. Do thou listen to my words. It is because a virgin desireth the company of every one, that she hath received the appellation of Kanya, from the root kama meaning to desire. Therefore, O thou of excellent hips and the fairest complexion, a virgin is, by nature, free in this world. Thou shalt not, O lady, by any means, be guilty of any sin by complying with my request. And how can I, who am desirous of the welfare of all creatures, commit an unrighteous act? That all men and women should be bound by no restraints is the law of nature. The opposite condition is the perversion of the natural state. Thou shalt remain a virgin after having gratified me. And thy son shall also be mighty armed and illustrious. Thereupon Kunti said, If, O dispeller of darkness, I obtain a son from thee, may he be furnished with a coat of mail and earrings, and may he be mighty armed and endued with great strength. Hearing these words of hers, Surya answered, O gentle maiden, thy son shall be mighty armed and decked with earrings and a celestial coat of mail. And both his earrings and coat of mail will be made of Amrita, and his coat will also be invulnerable. Kunti then said, If the excellent mail and earrings of the son thou wilt beget on me be, indeed, made of Amrita, then, O God, O worshipful deity, let thy purpose be fulfilled. May he be powerful, strong, energetic, and handsome, even like thee, and may he also be endued with virtue. Surya then said, O princess, O excellent damsel, these earrings had been given to me by a deity. O timid lady, I will bestow them, as also this excellent mail, on thy son. Kunti then said, Very well, O worshipful one. If my son, O Lord of light, becomes so, I will, as thou sayest, gratify thee. Vyasa continued, hearing these words of her, Surya said, So be it. And that ranger of the skies, that enemy of Swarbanu, with soul absorbed in yoga, entered into Kunti, and touched her on the navel. At this, that damsel, on account of Surya's energy, became stupefied. And that reverend lady then fell down on her bed, deprived of her senses. Surya then addressed her, saying, I will now depart, O thou of graceful hips. Thou shalt bring forth a son who will become the foremost of all wielders of weapons. At the same time thou shalt remain a virgin. Vyasa continued, Then, O foremost of kings, as the highly effulgent Surya was about to depart, that girl bashfully said unto him, So be it. And it was thus that the daughter of King Kuntabhoja, importuned by Surya, had after soliciting a son from him, fallen down stupefied on that excellent bed, like a broken creeper. And it was thus that deity of fierce rays, stupefying her, entered into her by virtue of yoga power, and placed his own self within her womb. The deity, however, did not sully her by deflowering her in the flesh. And after Surya had gone away, that girl regained her consciousness. Mahabharata, Book 3, Section 306. Vyasa said, "It was, O Lord of Earth, on the first day of the lighted fortnight during the 10th month of the year that Pritha conceived a son like the Lord himself of the stars in the firmament. And that damsel of excellent hips from fear of her friends concealed her conception, so that no one knew her condition. And as the damsel lived entirely in the apartments assigned to the maidens and carefully concealed her condition, no one except her nurse knew the truth. And in due time that beauteous maiden, by the grace of deity, brought forth a son resembling a very god. And even like his father, the child was equipped in a coat of mail, and decked with brilliant earrings. And he was possessed of leonine eyes and shoulders like those of a bull. And no sooner was the beauteous girl delivered of a child, than she consulted with her nurse and placed the infant in a commodious and smooth box made of wickerwork and spread over with soft sheets and furnished with a costly pillow. And its surface was laid over with wax, and it was encased in a rich cover. And with tears in her eyes, she carried the infant to the river Aswa, and consigned the basket to its waters. And although she knew it to be improper for an unmarried girl to bear offspring, yet from parental affection, O foremost of kings, she wept piteously. Do thou listen to the words Kunti weepingly uttered, while consigning the box to the waters of the river Aswa, O child, may good betide thee at the hands of all that inhabit the land, the water, the sky, and the celestial regions. May all thy paths be auspicious. May no one obstruct thy way. And, O son, may all that come across thee have their hearts divested of hostility towards thee, and may that Lord of waters, Varuna, protect thee in water. And may the deity that rangeth the skies completely protect thee in the sky. And may, O son, that best of those that impart heat, viz., Surya, thy father, and from whom I have obtained thee as ordained by destiny, protect thee everywhere. And may the Adityas and the Vasus, the Rudras and the Sathyas, the Viswadevas and the Maruts, and the cardinal points with the great Indra and the regents presiding over them, and, indeed, all the celestials, protect thee in every place. Even in foreign lands I shall be able to recognize thee by this mail of thine. Surely, thy sire, O son, the divine Surya possessed of the wealth of splendor, is blessed, for he will with his celestial sight behold thee going down the current. Blessed also is that lady who will, O thou that art begotten by a god, take thee for her son, and who will give thee suck when thou art thirsty. And what a lucky dream hath been dreamt by her that will adopt thee for her son, thee that is endued with solar splendor, and furnished with celestial mail, and adorned with celestial earrings, thee that hast expansive eyes resembling lotuses, a complexion bright as burnished copper or lotus leaves, a fair forehead, and hair ending in beautiful curls. O son, she that will behold thee crawl on the ground, begrimed with dust, and sweetly uttering inarticulate words, is surely blessed. And she also, O son, that will behold thee arrive at thy youthful prime like maned lion born in Himalayan forests, is surely blessed. O king, having thus bewailed long and piteously, Pritha laid the basket on the waters of the river Aswa. And the lotus-eyed damsel, afflicted with grief on account of her son and weeping bitterly, with her nurse cast the basket at dead of night, and though desirous of beholding her son often and again, returned, O monarch, to the palace, fearing lest her father should come to know of what had happened. Meanwhile, the basket floated from the river Aswa to the river Charmanwadi, and from the Charmanwadi it passed to the Yamuna, and so on to the Ganga. And carried by the waves of the Ganga, the child contained in the basket came to the city of Kampur ruled by a person of the Sudha tribe. Indeed, the excellent coat of mail and those earrings made of Amrita that were born with his body, as also the ordinance of destiny, kept the child alive. Mahabharata, Book 3, Section 307. Vyasa said, and it came to pass that at this time a Sudha named Adhiratha, who was a friend of Dhritarashtra, came to the river Ganga, accompanied by his wife. And, O king, his wife named Radha was unparalleled on earth for beauty. And although that highly blessed dame had made great endeavors to obtain a son, yet she had failed, O represser of foes, to obtain one. And on coming to the river Ganga, she beheld a box drifting along the current, and containing articles capable of protecting from dangers and decked with unguents. That box was brought before her by the waves of the Janvi. And attracted by curiosity, the lady caused it to be seized. And she then related all unto Adhiratha of the charioteer caste. And hearing this, Adhiratha took away the box from the waterside, and opened it by means of instruments. And then he beheld a boy resembling the morning sun. And the infant was furnished with golden mail, and looked exceedingly beautiful, with a face decked in earrings. And thereupon the charioteer, together with his wife, was struck with such astonishment that their eyes expanded in wonder. And taking the infant on his lap, Adhiratha said unto his wife, Ever since I was born, O timid lady, I had never seen such a wonder. This child that hath come to us must be of celestial birth. Surely, sonless as I am, it is the gods that have sent him unto me. Saying this, O Lord of earth, he gave the infant to Radha. And thereat, Radha adopted, according to the ordinance, that child of celestial form and divine origin, and possessed of the splendor of the filaments of the lotus, and furnished with excellent grace. And duly reared by her, that child endued with great prowess began to grow up. And after Karna's adoption, Adhiratha had other sons begotten by himself. And seeing the child furnished with bright mail and golden earrings, the twice-born ones named him Vasasena. And thus did that child endued with great splendor and immeasurable prowess became the son of the charioteer, and came to be known as Vasasena and Vrisha. And Pritha learnt through spies that her own son clad in celestial mail was growing up amongst the Angas as the eldest son of a charioteer, Adhiratha. And seeing that in process of time his son had grown up, Adhiratha sent him to the city named after the elephant. And there Karna put up with Drona for the purpose of learning arms. And that powerful youth contracted a friendship with Duryodhana. And having acquired all the 4 kinds of weapons from Drona, Kripa, and Rama, he became famous in the world as a mighty bowman. And after having contracted a friendship with Dhritarashtra's son, he became intent on injuring the sons of Pritha. And he was always desirous of fighting with the high-souled Falguna. And, O king, ever since they first saw each other, Karna always used to challenge Arjuna, and Arjuna, on his part, used to challenge him. This, O foremost of kings, was without doubt the secret known to the son, viz., begot by himself on Kunti. Karna was being reared in the race of the Suddas. And beholding him decked with his earrings and mail, Yudhishthira thought him to be unslayable in fight, and was exceedingly pained at it. And when, O foremost of monarchs, Karna, after rising from the water, used at midday to worship the effulgent Surya with joined hands, the Brahmanas used to solicit him for wealth. And at that time there was nothing that he would not give away to the twice-born ones. And Indra, assuming the guise of a Brahmana, appeared before him at such a time, and said, Give me. And thereupon Radha's son replied unto him, Thou art welcome. Mahabharata, Book 3, Section 308. Vaisampayana said, And when the king of the celestials presented himself in the guise of a Brahmana, beholding him, Kama said, Welcome. And not knowing his intention, Adhiratha's son addressed the Brahmana, saying, Of a necklace of gold, and beauteous damsels, and villages with plenty of kine, which shall I give thee? Thereupon the Brahmana replied, I ask thee not to give me either a necklace of gold, or fair damsels, or any other agreeable object. To those do thou give them that ask for them. If, O sinless one, thou art sincere in thy vow, then wilt thou, cutting off, from thy person, this coat of mail borne with thy body, and these earrings also, bestow them on me. I desire, O chastiser of foes, that thou mayst speedily give me these, for this one gain of mine will be considered as superior to every other gain. Hearing these words, Kama said, O Brahmana, I will give thee homestead land, and fair damsels, and kine, and fields, but my mail and earrings I am unable to give thee. Vaisampayana continued, Although thus urged with various words by Karna, still, O chief of the Bharata race, that Brahmana did not ask for any other boon. And although Karna sought to pacify him to the best of his power, and worshipped him duly, yet that best of Brahmanas did not ask for any other boon. And when that foremost of Brahmanas did not ask for any other boon, Radha's son again spake unto him with a smile, My male, O regenerate one, hath been born with my body, and this pair of earrings hath arisen from Amrita. It is for these that I am unslayable in the worlds. Therefore, I cannot part with them. Do thou, O bull among Brahmanas, accept from me the entire kingdom of the earth, rid of enemies and full of prosperity. O foremost of regenerate ones, if I am deprived of my earrings, and the male born with my body, I shall be liable to be vanquished by the foes. Vyasa continued, when the illustrious slayer of Pakar refused to ask for any other boon, Kama with a smile again addressed him, saying, O God of gods, even before this, I had recognized thee, O Lord. O Sakra, it is not proper for me to confer on thee any unprofitable boon, for thou art the very Lord of the celestials. On the contrary, being as thou art the Creator and Lord of all beings, it is thou that shouldst confer boons on me. If, O God, I give thee this coat of mail and earrings, then I am sure to meet with destruction, and thou shalt also undergo ridicule. Therefore, O Sakra, take my earrings and excellent mail in exchange for something conferred by thee on me. Otherwise, I will not bestow them on thee. Thereupon Sakra replied, Even before I had come to thee, Surya had known of my purpose, and without doubt, it is he that hath unfolded everything unto thee. O Karna, be it as thou wishest. O son, accept the thunderbolt alone, tell me what it is that thou desirest to have. Vyasa continued, hearing these words of Indra, Karna was filled with delight, and seeing that his purpose was about to be accomplished, he approached Vasva, and intent upon obtaining a dart incapable of being baffled, he addressed Indra, saying, Do thou, O Vasva, in exchange for my coat of mail and earrings, give me a dart incapable of being baffled, and competent to destroy hosts of enemies when arrayed in order of battle. Thereupon, O ruler of earth, fixing his mind for a moment on the dart, for bringing it there, Vasva thus spake unto Karna, Do thou give me thy earrings, and the coat of mail born with thy body, and in return take this dart on these terms. When I encounter the Daitya in battle, this dart that is incapable of being baffled, hurled by my hand, destroyeth enemies by hundreds, and cometh back to my hand after achieving its purpose. In thy hand, however, this dart, O son of Sudha, will slay only one powerful enemy of thine. And having achieved that feat, it will, roaring and blazing, return to me. Thereat Karna said, I desire to slay in fierce fight even one enemy of mine, who roareth fiercely and is hot as fire, and of whom I am in fear. At this, Indra said, Thou shalt slay such a roaring and powerful foe in battle. But that one whom thou seekest to slay is protected by an illustrious personage. Even he whom persons versed in the Vedas called the invincible boar, and the incomprehensible Narayana, even that Krishna himself, is protecting him. Thereupon Karna replied, Even if this be so, do thou, O illustrious one, give me the weapon that will destroy only one powerful foe. I shall, on my part, bestow on thee my mail and earrings, cutting them off my person. Do thou, however, grant that my body, thus wounded, may not be unsightly. Hearing this, Indra said, As thou, O Karna, art bent upon observing the truth, thy person shall not be unsightly, or shall any scar remain on it. And, O thou best of those that are graced with speech, O Karna, thou shalt be possessed of complexion and energy of thy father himself. And if, maddened by wrath, thou hurlest this dart, while there are still other weapons with thee, and when thy life also is not in imminent peril, it will fall even on thyself. Karna answered, As thou directest me, O Sakra, I shall hurl this Vasvi dart only when I am in imminent peril. Truly I tell thee this. Vyasa continued, Thereupon, O king, taking the blazing dart, Karna began to peel off his natural mail. And beholding Karna cutting his own body, the entire host of celestials and men and Danavas set up a leonine roar. And Karna betrayed no contortions of face while peeling his mail. And beholding that hero among men thus cutting his body with an weapon, smiling ever and anon, celestial kettledrums began to be played upon, and celestial flowers began to be showered on him. And Karna, cutting off the excellent mail from his person, gave it to Vasva, still dripping. And cutting off his earrings also from off his ears, he made them over to Indra. And it is for this fact that he came to be called Karna. And Sakra, having thus beguiled Karna that made him famous in the world, thought with a smile that the business of the sons of Pandu had already been completed. And having done all this, he ascended to heaven. And hearing that Karna had been beguiled, all the sons of Dhritarashtra became distressed and shorn of pride. And the sons of Pritha, on the other hand, learning that such plight had befallen the son of the charioteer, were filled with joy. Janamejaya said, "When were those heroes, the sons of Pandu, at that time? And from whom did they hear this welcome news? And what also did they do, when the 12th year of their exile passed away? Do thou, O illustrious one, tell me all this." Vyasa said, "Having defeated the chief of the Pandavas, and rescued Krishna, and having outlived the entire term of their painful exile in the woods, and having listened to the ancient stories about gods and rishis recited by Markandeya, those heroes among men returned from their asylum in Kamayaka to the sacred Dvaitavana, with all their cars and followers, and accompanied by their charioteers, their kind, and the citizens who had followed them." Aranya Parva. Mahabharata, Book 3, Section 309. Janamejaya said, "Having felt great affliction on account of the abduction of their wife and having rescued Krishna thereafter, what did the Pandavas next do?" Vyasa said, "Having felt great affliction on account of the abduction of Krishna, King Yudhishthira of unfading glory, with his brothers, left the woods of Kamayaka and returned to the delightful and picturesque Dvaitavana abounding in trees and containing delicious fruits and roots. And the sons of Pandu with their wife Krishna began to reside there, living frugally on fruits and practicing rigid vows. And while those repressors of foes, the virtuous King Yudhishthira, the son of Kunti, and Bhimasena, and Arjuna, and those other sons of Pandu born of Madri, were dwelling in Dvaitavana, practicing rigid vows, they underwent, for the sake of a Brahmana, great trouble, which, however, was destined to bring about their future happiness. I will tell thee all about the trouble which those foremost of Kurus underwent while living in those woods, and which in the end brought about their happiness. Do thou listen to it. Once on a time, as a deer was butting about, it chanced that the 2 sticks for making fire and a churning staff belonging to a Brahmana devoted to ascetic austerities struck fast into its antlers. And, thereupon, O king, that powerful deer of exceeding fleetness with long bounds speedily went out of the hermitage, taking those articles away. And, O foremost of Kurus, seeing those articles of his thus carried away, the Brahmana, anxious on account of his Agnihotra, quickly came before the Pandavas. And approaching without loss of time Ajatasattu seated in that forest with his brothers, the Brahmana, in great distress, spake these words, "As a deer was butting about, it happened, O king, that my fire sticks and churning staff which had been placed against a large tree stuck fast to its antlers. O king, that powerful deer of exceeding fleetness hath speedily gone out of the hermitage with long bounds, taking those articles away. Tracking that powerful deer, O king, by its footprints, do ye sons of Pandu, bring back those articles of mine, so that my Agnihotra may not be stopped." Hearing these words of the Brahmana, Yudhishthira became exceedingly concerned. And the son of Kunti taking up his bow sallied out with his brothers. And putting on their corselets and equipped with their bows, those bulls among men, intent upon serving the Brahmana, swiftly sallied out in the wake of the deer. And descrying the deer at no great distance, those mighty warriors discharged at it barbed arrows and javelins and darts, but the sons of Pandu could not pierce it by any means. And as they struggled to pursue and slay it, that powerful deer became suddenly invisible. And losing sight of the deer, the noble-minded sons of Pandu, fatigued and disappointed and afflicted with hunger and thirst, approached a banyan tree in that deep forest, and sat down in its cool shade. And when they had sat down, Nakula, stricken with sorrow and urged by impatience, addressed his eldest brother of the Kuru race, saying, "In our race, O king, virtue hath never been sacrificed, nor hath there been loss of wealth from insolence. And being asked, we have never said to any creature, nay. Why then in the present case have we met with this disaster?" Mahabharata, Book 3, Section 310. Yudhishthira said, "There is no limit to calamities. Nor is it possible to ascertain either their final or efficient cause. It is the Lord of justice alone who distributeth the fruits of both virtue and vice." Thereupon Bhima said, "Surely, this calamity hath befallen us, because I did not slay the Pratikaman on the very spot, when he dragged Krishna as a slave into the assembly." And Arjuna said, "Surely, this calamity hath befallen us, because I resented not those biting words piercing the very bones, uttered by the Suta's son." And Sadeva said, Surely, O Bharata, this calamity hath befallen us because I did not slay Sakuni when he defeated thee at dice. Vaisampayana continued, Then King Yudhishthira addressed Nakula saying, Do thou, O son of Madri, climb this tree and look around the 10 points of the horizon. Do thou see whether there is water near us or such trees as grow on watery grounds. O child, these thy brothers are all fatigued and thirsty. Thereupon saying, So be it, Nakula speedily climbed up a tree, and having looked around, said unto his eldest brother, O king, I see many a tree that groweth by the waterside, and I hear also the cries of cranes. Therefore, without doubt, water must be somewhere here. Hearing these words, Kunti's son Yudhishthira, firm in truth, said, O amiable one, go thou and fetch water in these quivers. Saying, So be it, at the command of his eldest brother Nakula quickly proceeded towards the place where there was water and soon came upon it. And beholding a crystal lake inhabited by cranes, he desired to drink of it, when he heard these words from the sky, O child, do not commit this rash act. This lake hath already been in my possession. Do thou, O son of Madri, first answer my questions and then drink of this water and take away as much as thou requirest. Nakula, however, who was exceedingly thirsty, disregarding these words, drank of the cool water, and having drunk of it, dropped down dead. And, O repressor of foes, seeing Nakula's delay, Yudhishthira the son of Kunti said unto Sadeva, the heroic brother of Nakula, O Sadeva, it is long since our brother, he who was born immediately before thee, hath gone from hence. Do thou, therefore, go and bring back thy uterine brother, together with water. At this, Sadeva, saying, So be it, set out in that direction, and coming to the spot, beheld his brother lying dead on the ground. And afflicted at the death of his brother, and suffering severely from thirst, he advanced towards the water, when these words were heard by him, O child, do not commit this rash act. This lake hath already been in my possession. First answer my question, and then drink of the water and take away as much as thou mayst require. Sadeva, however, who was extremely thirsty, disregarding these words, drank of the water, and having drunk of it, dropped down dead. Then Yudhishthira, the son of Kunti, said unto Vijaya, It is long since, O Vibhatsu, that thy 2 brothers have gone, O repressor of foes. Blessed be thou. Do thou bring them back, together with water. Thou art, O child, the refuge of us all when plunged in distress. Thus addressed, the intelligent Gudakiza, taking his bow and arrows and also his naked sword, set out toward that lake of waters. And reaching that spot, he whose car was drawn by white steeds beheld those tigers among men, his 2 younger brothers who had come to fetch water, lying dead there. And seeing them as if asleep, that lion among men, exceedingly aggrieved, raised his bow and began to look around that wood. But he found none in that mighty forest. And, being fatigued, he who was capable of drawing the bow by his left hand as well, rushed in the direction of the water. And as he was rushing towards the water, he heard these words from the sky, Why dost thou approach this water? Thou shalt not be able to drink of it by force. If thou, O Kante, can answer the question I will put to thee, then only shalt thou drink of the water and take away as much as thou requirest, O Bharata. Thus forbidden, the son of Pritha said, Do thou forbid me by appearing before me. And when thou shalt be sorely pierced with my arrows, thou wilt not then again speak in this way. Having said this, Partha covered all sides with arrows inspired by mantras. And he also displayed his skill in shooting at an invisible mark by sound alone. And, O bull of the Bharata race, sorely afflicted with thirst, he discharged barbed darts and javelins and iron arrows, and showered on the sky innumerable shafts incapable of being baffled. Thereupon, the invisible Yaksha said, What need of all this trouble, O son of Pritha? Do thou drink only after answering my questions. If thou drink, however, without answering my questions, thou shalt die immediately after. Thus addressed, Pritha's son Dhananjaya, capable of drawing the bow with his left hand as well, disregarding those words, drank of the water, and immediately after dropped down dead. And, seeing Dhananjaya's delay, Kunti's son Yudhishthira addressed Bhimasena, saying, O repressor of foes, it is a long while that Nakula and Sadeva and Vibhatsu have gone to fetch water, and they have not come yet, O Bharata. Good betide thee. Do thou bring them back, together with water. Thereupon saying, So be it, Bhimasena set out for that place where those tigers among men, his brothers, lay dead. And beholding them, Bhima, afflicted though he was with thirst, was exceedingly distressed. And that mighty armed hero thought all that to have been the act of some Yaksha or Rakshasa. And Pritha's son Vrikottara thought, I shall surely have to fight today. Let me, therefore, first appease my thirst. Then that bull of the Bharata race rushed forward with the intention of drinking. Thereupon the Yaksha said, O child, do not commit this rash act. This lake hath already been in my possession. Do thou first answer my questions, and then drink and take away as much water as thou requirest. Vaisampayana continued, thus addressed by that Yaksha of immeasurable energy, Bhima, without answering his questions, drank of the water. And as soon as he drank, he fell down dead on the spot. Then thinking that his brothers had left him long since, Yudhishthira waited for some time. And the king said unto himself again and again, Why is it that the two sons of Madri are delaying? And why doth the wielder also of the Gandiva delay? And why doth Bhima too, endued with great strength, delay? I shall go to search for them. And resolved to do this, the mighty armed Yudhishthira then rose up, his heart burning in grief. And that bull among men, the royal son of Kunti, thought within himself, Is this forest under some malign influence? Or is it infested by some wicked beasts? Or have they all fallen in consequence of having disregarded some mighty being? Or, not finding water in the spot whither those heroes had first repaired, they have spent all this time in search through the forest? What is that reason for which those bulls among men do not come back? And speaking in this strain, that foremost of monarchs, the illustrious Yudhishthira, entered into that mighty forest where no human sound was heard, and which was inhabited by deer and bears and birds, and which was adorned with trees that were bright and green, and which echoed with the hum of the black bee and the notes of winged warblers. As he was proceeding along, he beheld that beautiful lake which looked as if it had been made by the celestial artificer himself. And it was adorned with flowers of a golden hue and with lotuses and sindivars. And it abounded with canes and katakas and caraveras and pipolas, and fatigued with toil, Yudhishthira saw that tank and was struck with wonder. Mahabharata, Book 3, Section 311. Vaisampayana said, Yudhishthira saw his brothers, each possessed of the glory of Indra himself, lying dead like the regents of the world dropped from their spheres at the end of the yuga. And beholding Arjuna lying dead, with his bow and arrows dropped on the ground, and also Bhimasena and the twins motionless and deprived of life, the king breathed a hot and long sigh, and was bathed in tears of grief. And beholding his brothers lying dead, the mighty armed son of Dharma, with heart racked in anxiety, began to lament profusely, saying, Thou hadst, O mighty armed Vrikottara, vowed, saying, I shall with mace smash the thighs of Duryodhana in battle. O enhancer of the glory of the Kurus, in thy death, O mighty armed and high-souled one, all that hath become fruitless now. The promises of men may be ineffectual, but why have the words of the gods uttered in respect of thee been thus fruitless? O Dhananjaya, while thou wert in thy mother's lying in room, the gods had said, O Kunti, this thy son shall not be inferior to him of 1,000 eyes. And in the northern Parapatra mountains, all beings had sung, saying, The prosperity of this race, robbed by foes, will be recovered by this one without delay. No one will be able to vanquish him in battle, while there will be none whom he will not be able to vanquish. Why then hath that Jishnu endued with great strength been subject to death? Oh, why doth that Dhananjaya, relying on whom we had hitherto endured all this misery, lie on the ground blighting all my hopes? Why have those heroes, those mighty sons of Kunti, Bhimasena and Dhananjaya, came under the power of the enemy, those who themselves always slew their foes, and whom no weapons could resist? Surely, this vile heart of mine must be made of adamant, since, beholding these twins lying today on the ground, it doth not split. Ye bulls among men, versed in holy writ and acquainted with the properties of time and place, and endued with ascetic merit, ye who duly performed all sacred rites, why lie ye down, without performing acts deserving of you? Alas, why lie ye insensible on the earth, with your bodies unwounded, ye unvanquished ones, and with your vows untouched? And beholding his brothers sweetly sleeping there as they usually did, on mountain slopes, the high-souled king, overwhelmed with grief and bathed in sweat, came to a distressful condition. And saying, "It is even so," that virtuous lord of men, immersed in an ocean of grief, anxiously proceeded to ascertain the cause of that catastrophe. And that mighty-armed and high-souled one, acquainted with the divisions of time and place, could not settle his course of action. Having thus bewailed much in this strain, the virtuous Yudhishthira, the son of Dharma or Tapu, restrained his soul and began to reflect in his mind as to who had slain those heroes. There are no strokes of weapons upon these, nor is any one's footprint here. The being must be mighty, I ween, by whom my brothers have been slain. Earnestly shall I ponder over this, or let me first drink of the water, and then know all. It may be that the habitually crooked-minded Duryodhana hath caused this water to be secretly placed here by the king of the Gandharvas. What man of sense can trust wicked wight of evil passions with whom good and evil are alike? Or, perhaps, this may be an act of that wicked-souled one through secret messengers of his. And it was thus that that highly intelligent one gave way to diverse reflections. He did not believe that water to have been tainted with poison, for though dead, no corpse-like pallor was on them. The color on the faces of these my brothers hath not faded. And it was thus that Yudhishthira thought. And the king continued, each of these foremost of men was like unto a mighty cataract. Who, therefore, save Yama himself, who in due time bringeth about the end of all things, could have baffled them thus? And having concluded this for certain, he began to perform his ablutions in that lake. And while he descended into it, he heard these words from the sky, uttered by the Yiksha, I am a crane, living on tiny fish. It is by me that thy younger brothers have been brought under the sway of the Lord of departed spirits. If thou, O prince, answer not the questions put by me, even thou shalt number the fifth corpse. Do not, O child, act rashly. This lake hath already been in my possession. Having answered my questions first, do thou, O Kunti's son, drink and carry away, as much as thou requirest. Hearing these words, Yudhishthira said, Art thou the foremost of the Rudras, or of the Vasus, or of the Marutas? I ask, what god art thou? This could not have been done by a bird. Who is it that hath overthrown the four mighty mountains, viz., the Himavat, the Parapatra, the Vindhya, and the Malaya? Great is the feat done by thee, thou foremost of strong persons. Those whom neither gods, nor Gandharvas, nor Asuras, nor Rakshasas could endure in mighty conflict, have been slain by thee. Therefore, exceedingly wonderful is the deed done by thee. I do not know what thy business may be, nor do I know thy purpose. Therefore, great is the curiosity and fear also that have taken possession of me. My mind is greatly agitated, and as my head also is aching, I ask thee, therefore, O worshipful one, who art thou that stayest here? Hearing these words, the Yiksha said, I am, good betide thee, a Yiksha, and not an amphibious bird. It is by me that all these brothers of thine, endued with mighty prowess, have been slain. Vaisampayana continued, hearing these accursed words couched in harsh syllabus, Yudhishthira, O king, approaching the Yiksha who had spoken then, stood there. And that bull among the Bharatas then beheld that Yiksha of unusual eyes and huge body, tall like a palmyra palm and looking like fire or the sun, and irresistible and gigantic like a mountain, staying on a tree, and uttering a loud roar deep as that of the clouds. And the Yiksha said, These thy brothers, O king, repeatedly forbidden by me, would forcibly take away water. It is for this that they have been slain by me. He that wisheth to live should not, O king, drink this water. O son of Pritha, act not rashly. This lake hath already been in my possession. Do thou, O son of Kunti, first answer my questions, and then take away as much as thou likest. Yudhishthira said, I do not, O Yiksha, covet what is already in thy possession. O bull among male beings, virtuous persons never approve that one should applaud his own self. Without boasting, I shall, therefore, answer thy questions, according to my intelligence. Do thou ask me. The Yiksha then said, What is it that mocketh the sun rise? Who keeps him company? Who causeth him to set? And in whom is he established? Yudhishthira answered, Brahma mocketh the sun rise, the gods keep him company, Dharma causeth him to set, and he is established in truth. The Yiksha asked, By what doth one become learned? By what doth he attain what is very great? How can one have a second? And, O king, how can one acquire intelligence? Yudhishthira answered, It is by the study of the Shrutis that a person becometh learned. It is by ascetic austerities that one acquireth what is very great. It is by intelligence that a person acquireth a second, and it is by serving the old that one becometh wise. The Yiksha asked, What constituteth the divinity of the Brahmanas? What even is their practice that is like that of the pious? What also is the human attribute of the Brahmanas? And what practice of theirs is like that of the impious? Yudhishthira answered, The study of the Vedas constitutes their divinity, their asceticism constitutes behavior that is like that of the pious, their liability to death is their human attribute, and slander is their impiety. The Yiksha asked, What institutes the divinity of the Kshatriyas? What even is their practice that is like that of the pious? What is their human attribute? And what practice of theirs is like that of the impious? Yudhishthira answered, Arrows and weapons are their divinity, celebration of sacrifices is that act which is like that of the pious, liability to fear is their human attribute, and refusal of protection is that act of theirs which is like that of the impious. The Yiksha asked, What is that which constitutes the sama of the sacrifice? What the yajus of the sacrifice? What is that which is the refuge of a sacrifice? And what is that which sacrifice cannot do without? Yudhishthira answered, Life is the sama of the sacrifice, the mind is the yajus of the sacrifice, the rik is that which is the refuge of the sacrifice, and it is rik alone which sacrifice cannot do without. The Yiksha asked, What is of the foremost value to those that cultivate? What is of the foremost value to those that sow? What is of the foremost value to those that wish for prosperity in this world? And what is of the foremost value to those that bring forth? Yudhishthira answered, That which is of the foremost value to those that cultivate is rain, that of the foremost value to those that sow is seed, that of the foremost value to those that bring forth is offspring. The Yiksha asked, What person, enjoying all the objects of the senses, endued with intelligence, regarded by the world and liked by all beings, though breathing, doth not offer anything to these five, viz., gods, guests, servants, pitris, and himself, though endued with breath, is not yet alive? The Yiksha asked, What is weightier than the earth itself? What is higher than the heavens? What is fleeter than the wind? And what is more numerous than grass? Yudhishthira answered, The mother is weightier than the earth, the father is higher than the heaven, the mind is fleeter than the wind, and our thoughts are more numerous than grass. The Yiksha asked, What is that which doth not close its eyes while asleep? What is that which doth not move after birth? What is that which is without heart? And what is that which swells with its own impetus? Yudhishthira answered, A fish doth not close its eyes while asleep, an egg doth not move after birth, a stone is without heart, and a river swelleth with its own impetus. The Yiksha asked, Who is the friend of the exile? Who is the friend of the householder? Who is the friend of him that ails? And who is the friend of one about to die? Yudhishthira answered, The friend of the exile in a distant land is his companion, the friend of the householder is the wife, the friend of him that ails is the physician, and the friend of him about to die is charity. The Yiksha asked, Who is the guest of all creatures? What is the eternal duty? What, O foremost of kings, is Amrita? And what is this entire universe? Yudhishthira answered, Agni is the guest of all creatures, the milk of kine is Amrita, Homa, therewith, is the eternal duty, and this universe consists of air alone. The Yiksha asked, What is that which sojourneth alone? What is that which is reborn after its birth? What is the remedy against cold? And what is the largest field? Yudhishthira answered, The sun sojourneth alone, the moon takes birth anew, fire is the remedy against cold, and the earth is the largest field. The Yiksha asked, What is the highest refuge of virtue? What of fame? What of heaven? And what of happiness? Yudhishthira answered, Liberality is the highest refuge of virtue, gift, of fame, truth, of heaven, and good behavior, of happiness. The Yiksha asked, What is the soul of man? Who is that friend bestowed on man by the gods? What is man's chief support? And what also is his chief refuge? Yudhishthira answered, The sun is a man's soul, the wife is the friend bestowed on man by the gods, the clouds are his chief support, and gift is his chief refuge. The Yiksha asked, What is the best of all laudable things? What is the most valuable of all his possessions? What is the best of all gains? And what is the best of all kinds of happiness? Yudhishthira answered, The best of all laudable things is skill, the best of all possessions is knowledge, the best of all gains is health, and contentment is the best of all kinds of happiness. The Yiksha asked, What is the highest duty in the world? What is that virtue which always beareth fruit? What is that which, if controlled, leadeth not to regret? And who are they with whom an alliance cannot break? Yudhishthira answered, The highest of duties is to refrain from injury. The rites ordained in the 3 Vedas always bear fruit. The mind, if controlled, leadeth to no regret, and an alliance with the good never breaketh. The Yiksha asked, What is that which, if renounced, mocketh one agreeable? What is that which, if renounced, leadeth to no regret? What is that which, if renounced, mocketh one wealthy? And what is that which, if renounced, mocketh one happy? Yudhishthira answered, Pride, if renounced, mocketh one agreeable, wrath, if renounced, leadeth to no regret, desire, if renounced, mocketh one wealthy, and avarice, if renounced, mocketh one happy. The Yiksha asked, For what doth one give away to brahmanas? For what to mimes and dancers? For what to servants? And for what to king? Yudhishthira answered, It is for religious merit that one giveth away to brahmanas, it is for fame that one giveth away to mimes and dancers, it is for supporting them that one giveth away to servants, and it is for obtaining relief from fear that one giveth to kings. The Yiksha asked, With what is the world enveloped? What is that owing to which a thing cannot discover itself? For what are friends forsaken? And for what doth one fail to go to heaven? Yudhishthira answered, The world is enveloped with darkness. Darkness doth not permit a thing to show itself. It is from avarice that friends are forsaken. And it is connection with the world for which one faileth to go to heaven. The Yiksha asked, For what may one be considered as dead? For what may a kingdom be considered as dead? For what may a shraddha be considered as dead? And for what, a sacrifice? Yudhishthira answered, For want of wealth may a man be regarded as dead. A kingdom for want of a king may be regarded as dead. A shraddha that is performed with the aid of a priest that hath no learning may be regarded as dead. And a sacrifice in which there are no gifts to brahmanas is dead. The Yiksha asked, What constitutes the way? What hath been spoken of as water? What as food? And what as poison? Tell us also what is the proper time of a shraddha, and then drink and take away as much as thou likest. Yudhishthira answered, They that are good constitute the way. Space hath been spoken of as water. The cow is food. A request is poison. And a brahmana is regarded as the proper time of a shraddha. I do not know what thou mayst think of all this, O Yiksha. The Yiksha asked, What hath been said to be the sign of asceticism? And what is true restraint? What constitutes forgiveness? And what is shame? Yudhishthira answered, Staying in one's own religion is asceticism, the restraint of the mind is of all restraints the true one, forgiveness consists in enduring enmity, and shame in withdrawing from all unworthy acts. The Yiksha asked, What, O king, is said to be knowledge? What, tranquility? What constitutes mercy? And what hath been called simplicity? Yudhishthira answered, True knowledge is that of divinity. True tranquility is that of the heart. Mercy consists in wishing happiness to all. And simplicity is equanimity of heart. The Yiksha asked, what enemy is invincible? What constitutes an incurable disease for man? What sort of a man is called honest and what dishonest? Yudhishthira answered, anger is an invincible enemy. Covetousness constitutes an incurable disease. He is honest that desires the weal of all creatures, and he is dishonest who is unmerciful. The Yiksha asked, what, O king, is ignorance? And what is pride? What also is to be understood by idleness? And what hath been spoken of as grief? Yudhishthira answered, true ignorance consists in not knowing one's duties. Pride is a consciousness of one's being himself an actor or sufferer in life. Idleness consists in not discharging one's duties, and ignorance in grief. The Yiksha asked, what hath steadiness been said by the rishis to be? And what, patience? What also is a real ablution? And what is charity? Yudhishthira answered, steadiness consists in one staying in one's own religion, and true patience consists in the subjugation of the senses. A true bath consists in washing the mind clean of all impurities, and charity consists in protecting all creatures. The Yiksha asked, what man should be regarded as learned, and who should be called an atheist? Who also is to be called ignorant? What is called desire, and what are the sources of desire? And what is envy? Yudhishthira answered, he is to be called learned who knoweth his duties. An atheist is he who is ignorant, and so also he is ignorant who is an atheist. Desire is due to objects of possession, and envy is nothing else than grief of heart. The Yiksha asked, what is pride, and what is hypocrisy? What is the grace of the gods, and what is wickedness? Yudhishthira answered, stolid ignorance is pride. The setting up of a religious standard is hypocrisy. The grace of the gods is the fruit of our gifts, and wickedness consists in speaking ill of others. The Yiksha asked, virtue, profit, and desire are opposed to one another. How could things thus antagonistic to one another exist together? Yudhishthira answered, when a wife and virtue agree with each other, then all the three thou hast mentioned may exist together. The Yiksha asked, O bull of the Bharata race, who is he that is condemned to everlasting hell? It behoveth thee to soon answer the question that I ask. Yudhishthira answered, he that summoneth a poor Brahmana promising to make him a gift, and then tells him that he hath nothing to give, goeth to everlasting hell. He also must go to everlasting hell, who imputes falsehood to the Vedas, the scriptures, the Brahmanas, the gods, and the ceremonies in honor of the Pitris. He also goeth to everlasting hell, who though in possession of wealth, never giveth away nor enjoyeth himself from avarice, saying, he hath none. The Yiksha asked, by what, O king, birth, behavior, study, or learning doth a person become a Brahmana? Tell us with certitude. Yudhishthira answered, listen, O Yiksha. It is neither birth, nor study, nor learning, that is the cause of Brahmanahood. Without doubt, it is behavior that constitutes it. One's behavior should always be well guarded, especially by a Brahmana. He who maintaineth his conduct unimpaired is never impaired himself. Professors and pupils, in fact, all who study the scriptures, if addicted to wicked habits, are to be regarded as illiterate wretches. He only is learned who performeth his religious duties. He even that hath studied the 4 Vedas is to be regarded as a wicked wretch, scarcely distinguishable from a Sudra, if his conduct be not correct. He only who performeth the Agnihotra and hath his senses under control is called a Brahmana. The Yiksha asked, what doth one gain that speaketh agreeable words? What doth he gain that always acteth with judgment? What doth he gain that hath many friends? And what he that is devoted to virtue? Yudhishthira answered, he that speaketh agreeable words becometh agreeable to all. He that acteth with judgment obtaineth whatever he seeketh. He that hath many friends liveth happily. And he that is devoted to virtue obtaineth a happy state in the next world. The Yiksha asked, who is truly happy? What is most wonderful? What is the path? And what is the news? Answer these 4 questions of mine, and let thy dead brothers revive. Yudhishthira answered, O amphibious creature, a man who cooketh in his own house, on the 5th or the 6th part of the day, with scanty vegetables, but who is not in debt and who stirreth not from home, is truly happy. Day after day countless creatures are going to the abode of Yama, yet those that remain behind believe themselves to be immortal. What can be more wonderful than this? Argument leads to no certain conclusion. The Shrutis are different from one another. There is not even one rishi whose opinion can be accepted by all. The truth about religion and duty is hid in caves. Therefore, that alone is the path along which the great have trod. This world full of ignorance is like a pan. The sun is fire, the days and nights are fuel. The months and the seasons constitute the wooden ladle. Time is the cook that is cooking all creatures in that pan. With such aids, this is the news. The Yiksha asked, Thou hast, O repressor of foes, truly answered all my questions. Tell us now who is truly a man, and what man truly possesseth every kind of wealth. Yudhishthira answered, The report of one's good action reacheth heaven and spreadeth over the earth. As long as that report lasteth, so long is a person to whom the agreeable and the disagreeable, weal and woe, the past and the future, are the same, is said to possess every kind of wealth. The Yiksha said, Thou hast, O king, truly answered, who is a man, and what man possesseth every kind of wealth. Therefore, let one only amongst thy brothers, whom thou mayst wish, get up with life. Yudhishthira answered, Let this one that is of darkish hue, whose eyes are red, who is tall like a large solid tree, whose chest is broad and arms long, let this Nakula, O Yiksha, get up with life. The Yiksha rejoined, This Bhimasena is dear unto thee, and this Arjuna also is one upon whom all of you depend. Why, then, O king, dost thou wish a stepbrother to get up with his life? How canst thou, forsaking Bhima, whose strength is equal to that of 10,000 elephants, wish Nakula to live? People said that this Bhima was dear to thee. From what motive then dost thou wish a stepbrother to revive? Forsaking Arjuna, the might of whose arm is worshipped by all the sons of Pandu, why dost thou wish Nakula to revive? Yudhishthira said, If virtue is sacrificed, he that sacrificeth it is himself lost. So virtue also cherisheth the cherisher. Therefore, taking care that virtue by being sacrificed may not sacrifice us, I never forsake virtue. Abstention from injury is the highest virtue, and is, I ween, even higher than the highest object of attainment. I endeavor to practice that virtue. Therefore, let Nakula, O Yiksha, revive. Let men know that the king is always virtuous. I will never depart from my duty. Let Nakula, therefore, revive. My father had 2 wives, Kunti and Madri. Let both of them have children. This is what I wish. As Kunti is to me, so also is Madri. There is no difference between them in my eye. I desire to act equally towards my mothers. Therefore, let Nakula live. The Yiksha said, Since abstention from injury is regarded by thee as higher than both profit and pleasure, therefore, let all thy brothers live, O bull of Bharata race. Footnotes 604:1 Samridya killing. 605:1 lit. Letters. 605:2 Behind the plain and obvious meanings of the words employed both in the question and the answer, there is a deeper signification of a spiritual kind. I think Nilkantha has rightly understood the passage. By aditya, which of course commonly means the sun, is indicated the unpurified soul, from adat sabdid in Indriya and c. The first question then becomes, who is it that exalteth the unpurified soul? The act of exaltation implies a raising of the soul from its earthly connections. The answer to this is Brahma, i.e., Veda or self-knowledge. The second question, what are those that keep company with the soul during its progress of purification? The answer is self-restraint and other qualities, which are all of a godlike or divine nature. The third question is, who lead the soul to its place, state, of rest? The answer is dharma, i.e., rectitude, morality, and religious observances. It is often asserted that one must pass through the observances, karma, before attaining to a state of rest or truth or pure knowledge. The last question is, on what is the soul established? The answer, according to all that has been previously said, is truth or pure knowledge. For the soul that is emancipated from and raised above all carnal connections is no longer in need of observances and acts, karma, but stays unmoved in true knowledge, jnana. 606:1 Nilkantha explains both Dhriti and Dvitiya in a spiritual sense. There is no need, however, of a spiritual explanation here. By Dhriti is meant steadiness of intelligence, by Dvitiya lit, a second. What Yudhishthira says is that a steady intelligence serves the purposes of a helpful companion. 606:2 Nilkantha explains this correctly, as I imagine, by supposing that by sacrifice is meant the spiritual sacrifice for the acquisition of pure knowledge. In the objective sacrifice which one celebrates, the sama, the yajus, and the rik mantras are all necessary. In the subjective sacrifice, the acquisition of true knowledge, life and mind are as necessary as the mantras from the Sama and the Yajur Vedas in an objective one. And as no objective sacrifice can do without the riks, being principally dependent on them, so the subjective sacrifices for acquiring true knowledge can never do without prayerfulness, which, I imagine, is represented as the riks. To understand this passage thoroughly would require an intimate acquaintance with the ritual of a sacrifice like the Agnishtoma or any other of that kind. 607:1 Some texts read apitatum for uvapitum. If the former be the correct reading, the meaning would be what is the best of things that fall? Nilkantha explains both avapatam and avapatam in a spiritual sense. By the first he understands they that offer oblation to the gods, and by the second, they that offer oblations to the pitris. The necessity of a spiritual interpretation, however, is not very apparent. 607:2 Yudhishthira has the authority of the Shrutis for saying that the one pervading element of the universe is air. 609:1 The word used in the question is dik, literally, direction. Obviously, of course, it means in this connection way. Yudhishthira answers that the way which one is to tread along is that of the good. 609:2 Footnote 2 The Shrutis actually speak of space as water. These are questions to test Yudhishthira's knowledge of the Vedic cosmogony. 609:3 The Shrutis speak of the cow as the only food, in the following sense. The cow gives milk. The milk gives butter. The butter is used in Homa. The Homa is the cause of the clouds. The clouds give rain. The rain makes the seed to sprout forth and produce food. Nilkantha endeavors to explain this in a spiritual sense. There is, however, no need of such explanation here. 609:4 What Yudhishthira means to say is that there is no special time for shraddha. It is to be performed whenever a good and able priest may be secured. Mahabharata, Book 3, Section 312. Vaisampayana continued, Then agreeable to the words of the Yaksha the Pandavas rose up, and in a moment their hunger and thirst left them. Thereupon Yudhishthira said, I ask thee that art incapable of being vanquished and that standest on one leg in the tank, what god art thou, for I cannot take thee for a Yaksha? Art thou the foremost of the Vasus, or of the Rudras, or of the chief of the Maruts? Or art thou the Lord himself of the celestials, wielder of the thunderbolt? Each of these my brothers is capable of fighting as 100,000 warriors, and I see not the warrior that can slay them all. I see also that their senses have refreshed, as if they have sweetly awaked from slumber. Art thou a friend of ours, or even our father himself? At this the Yaksha replied, O child, I am even thy father, the Lord of justice, possessed of great prowess. Know, bull of the Bharata race, that I came hither desirous of beholding thee. Fame, truth, self-restraint, purity, candor, modesty, steadiness, charity, austerities, and brahmacharya, these are my body. And abstention from injury, impartiality, peace, penances, sanctity, and freedom from malice are the doors through which I am accessible. Thou art always dear to me. By good luck thou art devoted to the 5, and by good luck also thou hast conquered the 6. Of the 6, 2 appear in the first part of life, 2 in the middle part thereof, and the remaining 2 at the end, in order to make men repair to the next world. I am, good betide thee, the Lord of justice. I came hither to test thy merit. I am well pleased to witness thy harmlessness, and, O sinless one, I will confer boons on thee. Do thou, O foremost of kings, ask of me boons. I shall surely confer them, O sinless one. Those that revere me never come by distress. Yudhishthira said a deer was carrying away the Brahmana's fire sticks. Therefore, the first boon that I shall ask is, may that Brahmana's adorations to Agni be not interrupted. The Yiksha said, O Kunti's son, endued with splendor, it was I who, for examining thee, was carrying away, in the guise of a deer, that Brahmana's fire sticks. Vysampayana continued. Thereupon that worshipful one said, I give thee this boon. Good betide thee. O thou that art like unto an immortal, ask thou a fresh boon. Yudhishthira said, We have spent these 12 years in the forest, and the 13th year is come. May no one recognize us, as we spend this year somewhere. Vysampayana continued. Thereat that worshipful one replied, I give this boon unto thee. And then reassuring Kunti's son having truth for prowess, he also said, Even if, O Bharata, ye range this entire earth in your proper forms, none in the 3 worlds shall recognize you. Ye perpetuators of the Kuru race, through my grace, ye will spend this 13th year, secretly and unrecognized, in Virata's kingdom. And every one of you will be able at will to assume any form he likes. Do ye now present the Brahmana with his fire sticks? It was only to test you that I carried them away in the form of a deer. O amiable Yudhishthira, do thou ask for another boon that thou mayst like. I will confer it on thee. O foremost of men, I have not yet been satisfied by granting boons to thee. Do thou, my son, accept a third boon that is great and incomparable. Thou, O king, art born of me, and Vidura of portion or mine. Thereat Yudhishthira said, It is enough that I have beheld thee with my senses, eternal God of gods, as thou art. O father, whatever boon thou wilt confer on me I shall surely accept gladly. May I, O Lord, always conquer covetousness and folly and anger, and may my mind be ever devoted to charity, truth, and ascetic austerities. The Lord of Justice said, Even by nature, O Pandava, hast thou been endued with these qualities, for thou art the Lord of Justice himself. Do thou again attain what thou asked for. Vysampayana continued. Having said these words, the worshipful Lord of Justice, who is the object of contemplation of all the worlds, vanished therefrom, and the high-souled Pandavas, after they had slept sweetly, were united with one another. And their fatigue dispelled, those heroes returned to the hermitage, and gave back that Brahmana his fire sticks. That man who pursueth this illustrious and fame-enhancing story of the revival of the Pandavas, and the meeting of father and son, Dharma and Yudhishthira, obtaineth perfect tranquility of mind, and sons and grandsons, and also a life extending over 100 years. And the mind of that man that layeth this story to heart never delighteth in unrighteousness, or in disunion among friends, or misappropriation of other persons' property, or staining other people's wives, or in foul thoughts. Footnotes 612:1 that is, tranquility of mind, self-restraint, abstention from sensual pleasures, resignation, and yoga meditation. 612:2 that is, hunger, thirst, sorrow, bluntness of mortal feeling, decrepitude, and death. Mahabharata, Book 3, Section 313. Vysampayana continued, commanded by the Lord of Justice to thus spend in disguise the 13th year of non-discovery, the high-souled Pandavas, observant of vows and having truth for prowess, sat before those learned and vow-observing ascetics that from regard were dwelling with them in their exile in the forest. And with joined hands they said these words, with the intention of obtaining permission to spend the 13th year in the manner indicated. And they said, Ye know well that the sons of Dhritarashtra have by deceit deprived us of our kingdom, and have also done us many other wrongs. We have passed 12 years in the forest in great affliction. The 13th year only, which we are to spend unrecognized, yet remaineth. It behoveth you to permit us now to spend this year in concealment. Those rancorous enemies of our Suyodhana, the wicked-minded Kama, and Suvala's son, should they discover us, would do mighty wrong to the citizens and our friends. Shall we all with the Brahmanas be again established in our own kingdom? Having said this, that pure-spirited son of Dharma King Yudhishthira, overwhelmed with grief and with accents choked in tears, swooned away. Thereupon the Brahmanas, together with his brothers, began to cheer him up. Then Daumya spake unto the king these words fraught with mighty meaning: O king, thou art learned and capable of bearing privations, art firm in promise, and of subdued sense. Men of such stamp are not overwhelmed by any calamity whatever. Even the high-souled gods themselves have wandered over various places in disguise, for the purpose of overcoming foes. Indra, for the purpose of overcoming his toes, dwelt in disguise in the asylum of Jiraprastha and Nishada, and thus attained his end. Before taking his birth in the womb of Aditi, Vishnu, for the purpose of destroying the Daityas, passed a long time unrecognized, assuming the form of the Hayagriba, horse-necked. Then how, disguising himself in the form of a dwarf, he by his prowess deprived Valley of his kingdom, hath been heard by thee. And thou hast also heard how Hutasana, entering into water and remaining in concealment, achieved the purpose of the gods. And O thou versed in duty, thou hast heard how Hari, with the view of overcoming his foes, entered into Sakra's thunderbolt, and lay concealed there. And, O sinless one, thou hast heard of the office the regenerate Rishi Orva at one time performed for the gods, remaining concealed in his mother's womb. And, O child, living in concealment in every part of the earth, Vivasvat, endued with excellent energy, at last entirely burnt up all his foes. And living disguised in the abode of Dasaratha, Vishnu of dreadful deeds slew the 10-necked one in battle. Thus, remaining in disguise in various places, high-souled persons have before this conquered their enemies in battle. Thus, cheered by these words of Daumya, the virtuous Yudhishthira, relying on his own wisdom and also that acquired from the scriptures, regained his composure. Then that foremost of strong persons, the mighty armed Bhimasena, endued with great strength, encouraging the king greatly, spake these words: Looking up to thy face, for permission, the wielder of the Gandiva, acting according to his sense of duty, hath not yet, O king, shown any rashness. And although fully able to destroy the foe, Nakula and Sundeva of dreadful prowess have been ever prevented by me. Never shall we swerve from that in which thou wilt engage us. Do thou tell us what is to be done. We shall speedily conquer our enemies. When Bhimasena had said this, the Brahmanas uttered benedictions on the Bharatas, and then, obtaining their permission, went to their respective quarters. And all those foremost of Yadis and Munis versed in the Vedas, exceedingly desirous of again beholding the Pandavas, went back to their homes. And accompanied by Daumya, these heroes, the 5 learned Pandavas equipped in vows, set out with Krishna. And each versed in a separate science, and all proficient in mantras and cognizant of when peace was to be concluded and when war was to be waged, those tigers among men, about to enter upon a life of non-recognition, the next day proceeded for crows, and then sat themselves down with the view of taking counsel of each other. Mahabharata, end of Book 3, Vana Parva. Present you by HinduMonastery.com.